Chapter 426. Dr. Pan continued to smile. Of course, if we can beat Team A, it'll be even more worth it. At the very least, we'll be able to poach a portion of Deep Blue's funds. You'll have to help me with this. I believe the Interstellar Joint Committee will make the correct judgment. Haha, that would require them to really use their brains. Alright, let's not talk about these boring things. I'm going to Xia City to see my sister and a few old friends while I'm at it. Why don't we hang out sometime? Alright. He Yuan didn't want to chat any longer. After exchanging a few polite words, she hung up and closed the invisible interface. Luonan didn't ask any more questions and no one else spoke either. The atmosphere was probably quite awkward. For the time being, she had no intention of replying. Looking at the list of matters that flowed in like a stream, He Yuan felt a rare gloominess. For the time being, she didn't want to pay any more attention. She stood up and walked to the window. The curtains sensed her presence and opened automatically. She touched the glass lightly and the sash moved to the side. This was a high-rise office area that was over 120 floors high. From here, one could see the bustling night scene of the metropolis of Xia City. There were splendid and magnificent lights, but there was also a boundless darkness. Just like the autumn wind blowing in the face, it swept up the hair on the temples and rolled up the curtains. It was both refreshing and cold. Yuan stood there quietly watching the night. Luonan gazed into the distance from the window. The Nade district was to the southeast. As their contact deepened, He Yuan's understanding of Luonan was constantly renewed. His impression of an ability user rookie with special talent gradually changed to a unique character with limitless potential who was constantly walking on the edge of danger. Whether it was Luonan's personal goals, the fields he touched upon, or the connections left behind by his grandfather and father, all of them doomed him to bear enormous pressure at all times. A single misstep and he would be mercilessly crushed. Right now, Luonan was more or less a bit muddle-headed. He Yuan would rather have him stay muddle-headed for a longer period of time. At the very least, the mood of gazing at the night sky would be slightly better. Several dozen kilometers away, Luonan's side of the night was tranquil. The community culture of the Nade district was relatively conservative. After 10 o'clock at night, there were very few noises in the surroundings. Most people had already fallen asleep or were preparing to sleep. As for Luonan, it would be very difficult for him to rest normally tonight. He Yuan still hadn't replied by the mission window. Luonan didn't press her any further. He just waited quietly. He leaned against the headboard and flipped the pages of his notebook. His thoughts were similar to the contents of these pages. They seemed to be constantly appearing, but there was no real meaningful information. He didn't even have the mood to pay attention to the fierce battle in the underground parking lot of Aurora Cloud City, even though it was the source of his emotions. In fact, the dim and unclear shallow consciousness had already revealed a different meaning. It was just like the mission window that had not responded. Even though he did not get a clear answer, he already had a trend. The research of the archetype format must have made great progress. This was obviously not good news for Luonan. As for how bad it was, Luonan did not know. Luonan closed his notebook and raised his head. What the naked eye could see was the ceiling, but his field of vision was much vaster. The battles of Aurora Cloud City had been reflected from the regions where the believers were located. The breadth of his field of vision exceeded that of practically everyone in Xia City. But at this time, it was unable to help him penetrate the barriers of space and time and clearly see the changes in the future. Closing his eyes, the darkness might be more suitable for his current mood. This kind of reaction was a little too much. What? Luonan was a bit unsure of his own thoughts, so he said that he shouldn't deceive himself in the future. His self-analysis was quite ruthless. He thought that it was because the new results of the archetype format had raised the threshold of challenge, causing him to feel fearful and uneasy. No, it shouldn't be like this. In the past, Luonan would have probably pondered over this by himself. But today he encountered this kind of subtle problem, and his method of handling it was more frank. He didn't open his eyes again. He pressed down on his ears and sent a message to He Yuan through the hexa ear. This time it was a private message. He did his best to discard the emotional overtones of the message. Do you have any concrete information on the breakthrough of the archetype format? He Yuan finally responded several seconds later. I do. It's still in a confidential state right now. I'll tell you in detail once the level drops, okay? It was a marvelous turn. He Yuan's response was a bit more emotional than usual. Luonan continued to ask, I just want to know the general direction and degree. It's always progressing. It's extremely fast. Really? Extremely fast? After a period of blank time, the other side suddenly asked in reply. Mr. Luo, do you have an idea of the global-level research system? He Yuan continued to speak without waiting for Luo Nan to respond. A few dozen Nobel Prize-level academic authorities are leading the way. Dozens of large and medium-sized laboratories have been established in various parts of the world. They have absorbed hundreds of thousands of first-rate scientists. They have spurred hundreds of thousands of researchers. They have leveraged trillions of funds. All for the sake of a single topic, a single goal. As long as it possesses a high degree of research value, it is related to the overall situation of global development. Under this kind of model, a mistake in a certain aspect is often no longer a mistake. It is merely the result of an insignificant experiment. Similarly, being correct is only correct. It is a good beginning, but it is far from the end. The somewhat lengthy explanation was like a flowing stream of water. It washed away the bewilderment in Luo Nan's mind. Luo Nan suddenly understood a bit. He was probing and asking, then what kind of treatment should a founder receive? A basic reputation. The right to be remembered fairly by others. Don't they belong to a part of the system? Or could it be that we have been excluded from this system from the very beginning? It seemed like he was no longer ignorant. He Yuan looked calmly at the night scene outside the window, but she was unable to see the youth's face several dozen kilometers away. As for the answer, whether she said it or not, it was meaningless. Luo Nan really did understand. At the very least, he understood a considerable part of it. Capital, power, and honor were never two ends of a seesaw. They were one. It was just like the structure revealed by formatting theory. There was certainly an axis. Then everything revolved around it. That was why it was called a system. He understood the weight and exclusivity of a system very well. Luo Nan was not afraid of these things. He had confidence and he had ambition. He just needed time to expand the construction of formatting theory layer by layer. He would become an extraordinary, a system with him as the axis. And he would emerge victorious in battle. He would stand at the apex of the stars as a matter of course. However, everything needed time. Luo Nan's mind was finally clear, but it was pierced by the blade of reason. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will lose all self-righteous imaginations. He could persevere. He could work hard. But could the old man, who gradually embraced death amidst his madness and loneliness, wait that long? Chapter 427. Luo Nan leaned against the headboard, half sitting, half lying down. The sealed room made him a bit uncomfortable. He subconsciously opened the curtains remotely, letting the night flow in. Perhaps he could dilute his gloomy mood a bit. His wristband vibrated slightly at this time. Someone had sent him a message. It was Xie Junping. Nanster, something has happened to Aurora Cloud City. Luo Nan was disinclined to reply to this sort of rotten news. He pretended not to see it. But this was more or less a reminder. It made him understand that no matter how his mental path twisted and changed, the plane of reality would not change because of his will. Things would proceed as they should. Aurora Cloud City, including Cloud City Water Village and the large residential area, had indeed entered emergency evacuation mode. Whether they were players, tourists, or white-collar workers, they were all required to quickly leave this area. For this reason, the government had even arranged for large vehicles to assist in the evacuation. Various media outlets received the news and rushed to the scene one after another. In this context, the large number of car owners were perhaps the most sensitive group. Due to the existence of the Internet of Things, the large-scale vehicle damage caused by the collapse of the underground parking lot could not be hidden from people. The scene of tens of thousands of people on the building receiving the vehicle damage alarm was quite spectacular. The outbreak of this problem brought quite a bit of difficulty to the evacuation work. The government departments responsible for related matters, such as security and public security, poured out a torrent of abuse at the instigators. But so what? The underground parking lot had a sixth floor. Well, there was no meaning in talking about the floor number right now. Only the first and a small portion of the second floor of the underground parking lot remained in the battle between the two B+ level powers. They barely managed to maintain their original layout. The remaining 4 floors had practically been completely turned into ruins. There was an endless stream of shattered rocks, twisted car bodies, and steel frames. Following the whistling shockwaves, they sputtered and tumbled. A normal person would die beyond recognition in less than 2 seconds here. Luo Nan watched everything coldly through the dual perspectives of the Wraith Sign and Cat Eyes. Right now, Tian Bang and Mo Luan were engaged in a suffocating close-quarters attack and defense. The figures of the two were practically fused together under the high-speed attack and displacement. In the blink of an eye, dozens of exchanges of attack and defense occurred. Hands, feet, knees, elbows, shoulders, and even the visible and invisible energy released outwards were all their weapons. They rubbed and twisted together, forming a blood-red tornado of flames. The precision of the structure was even greater than the condensation ring structure he was so proud of. Deducing from practical experience, wouldn't the shepherd's strength be 10 times that of his in order to form such a complex circuit? Although Ren Hong was the deputy first ablatum of the Blood Flame Order, his strength was at best between C+ and B-. It was impossible for him to reach this level. Luo Nan suddenly came to a realization when the terrifying backlash force surged back. The Blood Flame Order's herding technique must have used special techniques to transcend ranks to mold this type of complex configuration. From the looks of it, it certainly involved the resonance of the soul and energy. The effort invested was no small matter. Luo Nan was shocked. This was no longer just an imprint. It was a branch of the body and soul that grew here. If something were to happen and they weren't cut off in time, it would bring about a fatal chain reaction. Perhaps Ren Hong had a way to reduce the damage, but he was bound by Luo Nan's invisible chains. He lost his best opportunity. In the underground parking lot, Ren Hong's entire body was already frozen to death. He couldn't do anything. The invisible and traceless shackles and the terrifying backlash completely dominated his mind. The deep blue walkers protecting him finally realized something was wrong at this time. They immediately called for help. Only 2 seconds passed. Another 7 or 8 deep blue walkers arrived at Ren Hong's location, in addition to the 4th squad from before. The one leading them was Tian Bang's deputy, Senior Colonel Meng Tuesday. The group didn't say anything after they arrived. They synchronized and coordinated with Meng Tu at the center. Flames spread out and interweaved into a relatively independent region. This was a formatting domain without a doubt. It was a mystical place capable of dispelling the vast majority of extraordinary powers. It was reasonable to say that mental attacks and curse techniques would find it hard to penetrate this barrier. This was the most outstanding response Meng Tu could muster. It's a pity that the medicine isn't right. The connection between the backlash from the Blood Soul Temple and Ren Hong was much deeper and more concealed. It was a destructive force that directly acted upon the structure of Ren Hong's body and soul from the position of the polar domain. Chapter 430. Luo Nan's attention was completely focused on the Blood Soul Temple, but the most eye-catching thing on the material plane was still the showdown between Tian Bang and Mo Luan. Of the 2 publicly acknowledged B+ rank powerhouses, one was extraordinarily tyrannical, while the other was cruel and decisive. Their combat power had been greatly increased compared to normal, almost surpassing the limits of human beings. Their battle could be described as exciting and tragic. But no matter how exciting the duel was, it had to come to an end. As time passed, Tian Bang used the blood flame willpower as the axis and used the formatted domain to seal off the surroundings. Its power was infinitely close to the extraordinary domain, stripping away the advantages brought by Mo Luan's proficient body skills and the Black Soul body's void transformation. He firmly controlled the initiative of the battle and didn't give Mo Luan any more chances. Hit. As he shouted, Tian Bang punched out. The fist pressed down on the void. The blood flames and the format of fire interweaved and blended together, melting the void with a single strike. Tian Bang had been accumulating this punch for a long time. The impact could be said to be unprecedented. As soon as Mo Luan came into contact with it head-on, his figure twisted and disappeared. It was difficult for him to withstand it, and he knew that he couldn't take it head-on. Thus, he used the same trick again, intending to evade the frontal attack through shifting positions. However, his figure did not move. His body, which was still twisting and flickering between illusion and reality, was fatally restricted. He was locked in the void and became Tian Bang's living target. Tian Bang's fist came again and Mo Luan could only block it. The first few punches were still able to resist the transforming strength, but later on, the fiercely burning body and soul could no longer hold on. Tian Bang's punches were like landslides and tsunamis, endless and endless. Mo Luan didn't have any chance to adjust as the speed of the punches made people feel despair. The bloody flames that were brought about turned into gorgeous and cruel fireworks, instantly submerging Mo Luan. And in the depths of the dazzling brilliance, Mo Luan let out a shrill howl. His spirit swept up a prairie fire. He used the method he was best at to make the final collision with Tian Bang. In the span of 1 to 2 seconds, all the detection and scanning devices were rendered useless, and some were even destroyed by the sparks from the short circuit. As the core of the frontline command center, it suddenly became deaf and blind. but the corresponding turbulence could be felt even by the deaf and blind. The blood-red tornado that rose from the ground directly broke through the floor of the first floor of the underground parking lot. With the existence of the cloud world and the secret lock that was gear, even if the military dug 3 feet deep into Xia City, they would not be able to find the whereabouts of the Wraith sign. As for the group of people from the Blood Flame Order in Xia City, Luo Nan waited quietly for a moment. His thoughts flickered. He did not use the telescope, but he could see the turbulent layers of clouds rolling past like the waves of the sea. It was just as he had sensed in the cloud world. The connection between his soul body and his fleshly body had not been severed. Then it was possible for his connection with the Wraith sign to be maintained. In this way, even if he did not come to gear in the future, he could still use the Wraith sign to grasp the situation over there in real time. This was extremely ideal. Of course, he was able to maintain a smooth connection under the enormous and complex warps of the void, but this did not mean that others could do the same. Luo Nan's mind cut into the Wraith sign's body, paying attention to the Blood Soul Temple. At this time, the 3 fireflies in the garden-like structure of the second floor had already been extinguished. This represented that the connection between this place and the outside world had been completely severed. This point was in line with Luo Nan's expectations. The Wraith sign was able to temporarily block the connection in the polar domain. There was no reason for it to exist in the current situation. But it was worth noting that the extinguished fireflies did not return to nothingness. The 3 shepherd imprint configurations still existed. They transformed into gloomy grains of sand that fell on the second floor of the Blood Soul Temple. If Luo Nan had not been constantly monitoring them, he would have overlooked them. The shepherd imprint was indeed quite sinister. Luo Nan's consciousness streaked across the imprint that belonged to Mo Luan. He was a bit puzzled. The imprint of a dead person was actually preserved, and he could not see the difference between it and the other 2 imprints. He should have cleaned it up earlier. Oh, looking at Ren Hong's fate, he was going to die. Forget about it. In any case, Luo Nan was in the stomach of the Wraith sign, and he was under the control of the formatting theory system. He was not afraid of any mischief. Luo Nan paid attention to this. He did not want to stay in this sensitive area for too long. He made a detour around the large residential area and returned home. After his body and soul became one, Luo Nan looked over at Aurora Cloud City. Tianbang was quite calm. He issued orders one after another, attempting to lock onto the traces of Lady Halder and the other backbones of the Blood Flame Order of Xia City. But the clearer his goal was, the more it deviated from reality. Luo Nan swept a glance and the corner of his lips hooked up. That's right. Tianbang was in the limelight today. He had stepped on Mo Luan's old life to climb to the top. He would probably become one of the hottest characters on Earth for some time in the future. But his plan today was unable to reach perfection. And the most glaring mark was left there by Luo Nan himself. This wasn't the end yet. In the mission window, Papercut was analyzing the situation after today. For instance, the Blood Flame Order of Xia City had shed all pretense of cordiality with the military forces represented by Tianbang. They had lost Mo Luan, their greatest combat power, and their core backbone, the deputy first ablatum, had rebelled. Basically, they had no way to mingle in Xia City. Luo Nan lay on his bed looking at these messages, but he didn't pay much attention to them. After a moment, he opened the private chat window with He Yuan. He hesitated whether or not he should ask about Tianbang and the progress of the archetype formats research. But thinking of He Yuan's usual style, Luo Nan closed the window in the end. Through the closed system, he sent a message to Cat Eyes that she could evacuate. Then he turned his gaze to the cloud world and entrusted his consciousness to the Wraith sign. He wandered in this bizarre and dangerous world, his mind constantly spinning. That kind of mushed-mouth ape would form a nest at any time. He had to be careful. Oh, there was also Snake Tongue. He had to find her as soon as possible. With the Wraith Talisman it should be much easier. He could not stop monitoring the Blood Soul Temple. He had to figure out how to turn it into his own. Exploring the cloud world was also on the agenda. It turned out that worker Zhai had participated in the same surname recognition meeting, organized by the Civil Affairs Department. His main goal was to provide public relief to those orphans. It was a kind of charity activity. Bringing Di Weiwu out today was also a part of the event. They wanted to choose an extracurricular activity for him and provide financial support. Among his peers, Di Weiwu's background was quite legendary. Though he was young, he followed a tribe of vagrants across the wasteland and moved into Xia City. His parents and relatives had all died in the wilderness. At such a young age, it was unknown how he managed to survive among the nomads, who were known for their cruelty. Luo Nan hadn't thought too much about it before, but he was stimulated by the information of a vagrant. He looked at Di Weiwu again, and the familiarity from before became more and more clear. He probed, "Did you just move into Xia City in the Trigate district?" Worker Zhai nodded, "That's the place." Luo Nan slapped his thigh. There was no mistake about it. It was him, the little monkey. At the beginning of the month, Luo Nan had taken on the business of Trigate security. He had sent his soul into the body of the Crow, Inc., to scout the front lines of the Trigate district and the Forest Wall district. This was where he had interacted with this kid. Back then the kid had said, "Are you guys here to fight the gangs?" This had left a very deep impression on Luo Nan. And later on, Worker Zhai had seen this kid ride an electric scooter back and forth between the Trigate district and the Forest Wall district at high speed, receiving the teachings of Father. "What are you so excited about?" Di Weiwu gave him a sidelong glance. "Are you unhappy that I'm living in the Trigate district?" "It doesn't matter. In any case, I won't be there soon." Weiwu. Worker Zhai reprimanded lightly, and the kid rolled his eyes. Though he was still covered in spikes, he didn't say anything. Luo Nan could see that he quite approved of Worker Zhai. Luo Nan waved his hand. He didn't care. He just felt that the world was full of coincidences. It was very interesting. At the same time, he was a bit baffled. The Trigate district is outside the city, right? You guys have run quite far. Weiwu has already chosen a welfare home. It's in the Forest Wall district. It's not far from here. I wanted to choose an extracurricular activity for him. This kid is like a living monkey. His body is agile, so I wanted him to train in martial arts systematically. I just happened to be free today, so I took him to look for a martial arts gym. A martial arts gym. Shui Lei's sensory radar instantly activated. The martial arts gym is looking for us. Sorry? Only when the words left his mouth did he remember that the Divine Yu gym was closed for an indefinite period of time. Not a shadow of a person could be seen. He hurriedly raised his hand in apology, but he couldn't help but sigh in despair. Worker Zhai laughed. "Actually, I was considering your gym in the beginning. You guys have real skills there. I still have that training video of yours. But when I asked Papercut, I found out that you guys are moving. It seems that you guys are going to be closed for a period of time?" Shui Lei laughed in embarrassment. Luo Nan said, "There should be quite a few martial arts gyms in the society. For example, Mr. Giant Arm's Six Harmonies gym. Should be pretty good." Weiwu's temperament is quite jumpy. He doesn't quite fit in with the Six Harmonies gym. Plus, the Six Harmonies gym is by the sea. It's too inconvenient to pass through the city. Worker Zhai had considered everything thoroughly. He clearly cared a lot about this kid Weiwu. "Then have you chosen a target?" "The first step is to consider the Thunder Falcon Dojo. It has a branch in the Forest Wall district, and the main branch is located in the River Wu district. One is convenient, the other is skilled, and the instructor has real skills." Thunder Falcon? Luo Nan and Shui Lei glanced at each other. Their expressions were a bit odd. Wasn't this the martial arts gym that instructor Feng Jiejun was at back in Ocean Sky Cloud City? It seemed that Xiao Xinyu had quite a bit of enmity with that place. Luo Nan and Shui Lei were nervous for a few days after the incident, but Xiao Xinyu didn't care at all. There was no further news from Xiao Xinyu, and they gradually forgot about it. Now that they heard Worker Zhai mention it, they felt quite odd. However, the Divine Yu gym was closed for business. The two weren't petty people, so they didn't say much. The 100-knot worm had already arrived at the restaurant they had reserved. It was located in the River Wu district, and it had a bit of fame. Though it was almost 9 o'clock, the restaurant was still nearly full. Even though they had reservations, the four still had to wait in line for a while before it was their turn. But it would take some time for the dishes to be served, so Luo Nan wanted to order a drink. But Di Weiwu didn't appreciate it at all. "I don't want to touch that trash. Water is fine." This was strange. Was there a kid who didn't like to drink? Chapter 433. Di Weiwu said this, but when the main course of the dining hall was served, Di Weiwu adopted the posture of sweeping away the clouds like a whirlwind. He buried his head in his plate, unwilling to lift it up. He had ample reason for this. My body is growing, so I must ingest sufficient nutrients. Even if it's a bit excessive, I can digest it through training. As he spoke, the kid even patted Worker Zhai's arm. That's why I'm quite grateful to you, Godfather. Whether it's a thunder hawk or a swift, it's always good to have a place to digest the accumulated food. Worker Zhai had to hold his forehead at Luo Nan's aged appearance. Luckily, the kid soon threw himself into a new plate, and Worker Zhai had the opportunity to talk to Luo Nan about other things. I've tested the move you spoke of last time. It really is effective. My soul strength and interference power have both grown. Luo Nan didn't react at all. Worker Zhai simply spoke the truth when he saw Luo Nan like this. He looked at the cup of water in front of him with rapt attention. 2 seconds later, a drop of water the size of a fingernail rose from the cup, hovering above the rim. Luo Nan finally understood. Wasn't this the effect of the condensation ring he spoke to Papercut about when they were waiting last time? It's done? Before Worker Zhai could finish speaking, the drop of water above the rim of the cup collapsed and scattered. Worker Zhai's face was a bit pale, and a layer of sweat seeped from his forehead. This technique clearly consumed a lot of energy for him. Of course, 10 days ago he wouldn't even be able to touch the edge of this move with his unawakened level. Worker Zhai wiped away his sweat. In a non-combat state it can last for approximately 1 seconds. As for the combat state, there was no need to talk about it. 2 seconds of preparation time was practically meaningless in actual combat. Hold on. Let me think. The Sansho training Luo Nan received consumed too much mental energy. Chatting normally was fine, but he needed to compose himself and refocus his attention if he wanted to talk business. Half a minute later he said, "The volume of this condensation ring is too large. Its diameter is nearly 0.3 millimeters. It needs to be a bit smaller to increase the stability of the structure." Shuelei poked Luo Nan's arm when he saw the two begin their discussion. The dining hall's partitions were pretty good, so they didn't need to worry about other people seeing them. Don't forget that the kid Di Weiwu was right next to them. Di Weiwu was very sensitive about such things. He immediately glared at Shuelei. Isn't it just extraordinary power? What's there to hide? Shuelei let out an and choked. Di Weiwu disdainfully said, "It's only you young ladies and young masters in the city who bury your faces in the sand like ostriches. As long as it's a vagrant who has fought in the wilderness, who wouldn't know?" Chapter 434. Children's senses and emotions change very quickly. Di Weiwu originally didn't like Luo Nan very much. But now that they had a common topic of conversation, Din Wan, and their positions were relatively close, Di Weiwu's attitude was completely different with just a few words. Luo Nan actually wanted to ask about the creation order, but he swallowed his words in the end. From his perspective, it was better for children to stay away from religion. Even though the little fellow had been deeply influenced by Din Wan, he still wasn't a little saint who talked about the teachings of the creation order. This was good enough. It wasn't just Di Weiwu. Du Yong and Xie Junping didn't seem to be brainwashed. It was for this reason that Luo Nan had a pretty good impression of the creation order. The only thing he wasn't sure about right now was whether or not Worker Zhai knew about the creation order. Worker Zhai was a bit surprised when he found an opportunity to ask, "Din Wan is an ability user? Or a member of the order?" "You don't know? I've only met him twice. We didn't talk for long. I just remember that he was nimble with his hands. Some of the handicrafts he made were of a very high level. Some of the models had outstanding structures, proportions, and precision." "Really?" Luo Nan had a pensive look. Could it be that the so-called creation was just a literal meaning and not the meaning of creator? Worker Zhai had a good impression of Din Wan. "I think there shouldn't be a problem. Din Wan has a good personality." Di Weiwu, who had been eavesdropping, shouted, "Of course there's no problem with Din Wan. Are you guys spies? Why are you asking so many questions?" Luo Nan laughed. "No, I'm just curious. People in our circle talk about all sorts of things, but we're all connected. Isn't it fate?" The little fellow was quite satisfied with this explanation. He patted Luo Nan on the shoulder, pretending to be generous. "There's definitely fate. Actually, if you guys are interested in Din Wan, you can go talk to him. You don't need to pick a time. Tonight is fine. You guys can send me to the orphanage. I'll live there." Di Weiwu felt a bit guilty when he said this. Actually, the main reason for his proposal was that he didn't want to return to the Trigate district, a place where he couldn't find any fun. Luo Nan, Shuelei, and Worker Zhai exchanged glances. The restaurant was located on the west side of the River Wu district. It wouldn't take much time to get there. Half a minute later, Di Weiwu's suggestion took effect. Both the host and the guest enjoyed the meal. Di Weiwu, who claimed to be temperate, went out holding his stomach. After leaving the restaurant, they walked a short distance to the nearest bus stop. The orphanage was located in the Forest Wall District's recycling layer. The centipedes normally wouldn't go there, so only low-altitude public transportation was on the way. If this continued, Luonan would need to mobilize the society's channels to properly investigate. Well, this was another troublesome side issue. Luonan unconsciously sighed. Di Weiwu prodded him from the side. Your sister? Yeah. Their relationship isn't too good. Oh, you can't say that. Luonan shot a glance at him. You little brat, what are you trying to do with your bemoaning and pitying face? Di Weiwu patted Luonan. He was limited in size, so he could only pat the crook of Luonan's arm. You need to have a good relationship with your family. Don't get into fights so easily. Luonan's first reaction was to laugh, but he instantly thought that this cheerful and arrogant kid in front of him was an orphan who had lost all of his family. His smile unconsciously froze on his face. Di Weiwu didn't care at all. He casually changed the topic. Hey, look over there. It looks like another Thunder Falcon dojo. They were already standing at the bus stop right now. A large video of the Thunder Falcon dojo was displayed on an advertisement in the commercial center across the street. The visual effects were quite impactful. Worker Zhai led to another train of thought. The Thunder Falcon dojo has been expanding quite a bit recently. It's said that they have a military background. Look at this advertisement. It looks like they're using this as a selling point. Are the fighting techniques of the military suitable for children? Luonan and Shuelei glanced at each other. The military? Shuelei didn't deliberately belittle the Thunder Falcon dojo just because it was possible that his master had a grudge against the Thunder Falcon dojo. He answered honestly, there's no need to compare fighting techniques between the military and the civilian population. In terms of systematization and general standards, the military's techniques certainly exceed those of the civilian population by a large margin. The dojo master also said that after the Third War, the military paid great attention to the inheritance and development of physical techniques. Some of the methods used to nurture the younger generation are worth learning from. Really? Then Weiwu. Based on Weiwu's age alone, I suggest that no matter where he learns, it's best to start with Daoyin. From movement to stillness, from shallow to deep. If his energy sense is up to standard, then he can achieve circulatory Daoyin, or even both movement and stillness in a single semester. But it's not that easy to achieve, link up step by step. Shuelei needed to further explain when it came to some specialized terms. A group of men and women walked over from behind the bus stop at this time. One of them glanced over and laughed out loud. Chapter 435. Worker Zhai stared blankly for a moment before realizing that he had become the target of ridicule. He turned his head to look. There were 6 or 7 people over there, all around 20 or 30 years old. They were all smiling right now, but it was hard to tell who had spoken just now. Half of these people wore the same uniform. On the right chest was an abstract image of a bird. It looked like twisted lightning. Worker Zhai knew where these people came from when he saw this logo. Thunder Falcon Dojo. There was an escalator bridge a short distance away from the bus stop. It just so happened to lead to the newly launched branch dojo under the advertisement space of the shopping mall. This group of people must have taken advantage of the opening of the dojo to drink and celebrate. Luonan and Shuelei knew a bit more than Worker Zhai. They had already locked onto the person who had just spoken. The fellow's face was a bit red and he was staggering a bit as he walked. It was clear that he had drunk too much. But even so, they were able to recognize that they had met this person once before. Feng Jiejun, the dojo instructor who had hung out with Hidong Lu at Ocean Sky Cloud City. From then on, he radiated an abnormal hostility towards Shuelei and the Divine Yu Jim. Luonan's field of view was a bit wider. Aside from this group of people, he also noticed that there was another person who was on the phone 20 to 30 meters away. This person was originally on the same line as Feng Jiejun and the others. He was just distracted, so he fell behind. This fellow was also an acquaintance. Luonan and Shuelei were unwilling to pay attention to a drunkard like Feng Jiejun. Worker Zhai had an easygoing personality. He just furrowed his brows and didn't say anything. He even hugged Di Weiwu to prevent the kid from causing trouble. It had to be said that Worker Zhai understood his adopted son's personality very well. Even though he hugged Di Weiwu in time, words still came out of Di Weiwu's mouth. Who the hell are you? Feng Jiejun was currently tipsy. He laughed and took 2 steps forward. He extended his hand to touch Di Weiwu's head, but Di Weiwu avoided him. He snorted and pointed his arm at Shui Lei, unwilling to let him go. Coach Shui, your dojo can't continue operating anymore. There's no need to push people into a pit, right? Clearly, Feng Jejun's eyes and ears were half-baked after he was drunk. He didn't hear the first half of Shui Lei's words, which was tantamount to talking about his own dojo. Di Weiwu immediately laughed out loud. Then he raised his head and complained to worker Zhai, "You picked all over the place. Thunder Falcon and Lightning Bird? They're not that great." Even he himself said that he was tricked. Feng Jejun was no longer able to tell that worker Zhai and his son were in cahoots with Luo Nan and Shui Lei. He really did have a problem with his brain. His expression immediately turned cold and he glared at Di Weiwu. The little fellow's reaction was very fast, and her mouth was even more unforgiving. This person must be born in the year of the dog. He can change his face so easily. Worker Zhai smiled bitterly. He tightened his grip on the boy's arm so that he wouldn't let him continue tormenting him. Shui Lei also smiled and showed his talent for communication. "Don't mention coach, I'm still far from that level. Usually I just receive clients and shake hands with people. Nice to meet you again, Coach Feng." Feng Jejun's expression became even more unsightly. Shui Lei's words were undoubtedly an allusion to the fact that he had taken the initiative to shake hands with Ocean Sky Cloud City to probe for information, and had even suffered a loss. Shui Lei was also mocking him for not being qualified to be a coach. What made him even more embarrassed was that Shui Lei casually extended his hand as he spoke. It was as if he was going to shake hands with Feng Jejun again. Feng Jejun had already sobered up. He was weaker than Shui Lei by more than a level, at least in terms of strength. Only a month had passed and his strength was still the same. How could he be willing to lose face in front of his junior brothers and sisters? After hesitating for a second, Feng Jejun finally extended his hand and slapped Shui Lei's hand away. "What's the rush? On the day of the winter solstice, in the battle to establish our reputation, I will naturally ask for your guidance." It would have been better if he hadn't said these words. Luo Nan's and Shui Lei's fierce gazes pierced his face at the same time. The gazes of the two were different. Shui Lei's gaze was filled with a divine light of vitality. Feng Jejun's willpower was enough to resist it. However, Luo Nan was clearly wearing contact lenses. His eye sockets were permeated with a false luster, but behind that luster was an indescribable warping power. It made Feng Jejun tense up all of a sudden. He unconsciously took half a step back and adopted a defensive stance. The group of men and women traveling with Feng Jejun were a bit stupefied in the beginning. They didn't know why their senior brother suddenly didn't like these people. However, when Feng Jejun took up his stance, the quick-witted ones understood. 4 or 5 people immediately surrounded him. Shui Lei faced these people without the slightest fear. He took a large step forward and stood in front of Luo Nan and the Zhai father and son. His eyebrows were furrowed in anger, and his aura didn't yield in the slightest. Di Weiwu became excited when he saw this scene. He struggled to free his head from worker Zhai's arms and said loudly, "What does it have to do with you that other people are fishing? A dog that goes around randomly biting won't attract people's attention no matter how long its tongue is. It's better if you wag your tail more, loser." The child's voice was bright and clear. He called for a flying 100-knot bug and left in a hurry. It was already deep into the night. Only Luo Nan and the Zhai family's father and son could get on the bus stop. Seeing Shui Lei leave, Di Weiwu was actually a little disappointed, but he still said, "Are you still going to the orphanage?" Luo Nan was a bit hesitant, but the long-awaited low-altitude public transport finally arrived at the station at this time. When he saw Di Weiwu's pitiful eyes, his heart softened. "I'll go take a look." In any case, it was destined that he wouldn't be returning home tonight. There was no need for him to personally ask He Yuan about the matter. It could be settled on a low-altitude public transport. He could just treat it as coaxing a child. After getting on the public transport, the first thing Luo Nan did was ask his aunt for a leave of absence. He was a bit apprehensive in his heart, mainly because he had overlooked a point just now. If Emoya had first mentioned the matter of him not returning home, then he would have hit the muzzle of a gun. Luckily his luck was pretty good tonight. He could hear his aunt's voice. Emoya hadn't exerted herself. His performance had been good during this time, and his body was becoming healthier and healthier. This was a plus. His aunt only hesitated for a moment before agreeing. Luo Nan let out a long breath. After hanging up, he immediately contacted He Yuan without stopping. The god of luck was still watching over him, and the connection was made rather smoothly. He Yuan was silent for a moment after hearing Luo Nan's explanation. Then she responded, "From the monetary accounts, the Thunder Falcon Dojo has purchased a portion of the Castle Financial Group's assets in Xia City at a low price in the past few days. The timing is quite good, and there's a tacit understanding with the military's actions. A Juling has admitted to this as well. But I don't understand right now. What's going on with the Battle of Winter's Solstice?" He Yuan was silent for a few seconds before saying, "There's a grudge between Xiao Xinyu and Duan Hong, but both sides are acting according to the rules. It was like this 10 years ago and it's still like this 10 years later. It's best if we don't get involved. I still have things to do. I'm hanging up. Hello. Hello." Luo Nan and He Yuan had known each other for many years, but he had never been hung up so quickly before. He was a bit stupefied for a time. Perhaps she really did have something urgent to do? The low-altitude public transport entered the Forest Wall district in this muddle-headed state. After 7 or 8 stops, they arrived at the stop closest to the orphanage. Then they only needed to walk another 300 meters. Just from the route alone, the Thunder Falcon Dojo was quite compatible with the newly opened branch dojo. But worker Zhai wouldn't send Di Weiwu there to be tortured no matter what. 5 minutes later, Luo Nan stood in front of the orphanage that he had scanned with his telepathic thoughts. Luo Nan was quite curious about the Dean Wan that the Zhai father and son spoke of, and the guide that Xie Junping and Du Yong spoke of. He really wanted to know what was so special about this person, aside from the face of the preacher that he had sensed before. But when they knocked on the door, they heard this piece of news: Dean Wan went out. It looks like he accepted an invitation. Nurse Wang of the orphanage was acquainted with the Zhai father and son. This old woman understood the ways of the world. She welcomed them in and greeted them warmly. This orphanage was reconstructed from the lower level of an abandoned shopping mall. Relatively speaking, it was already a relatively safe place on the recycling stratum. Over 20 rooms were separated and 30 or so people lived there. All of them were teenagers and children under the age of 14. Most of them should have been asleep at this time, but Di Weiwu's arrival caused quite a few of his little friends to become excited in an instant. They chattered noisily, forcing Nurse Wang to use the name of the dean to suppress them. Everything was settled down with great difficulty. Nurse Wang took the place of Dean Wan and fulfilled her duties as the host. She led worker Zhai and Luo Nan around the orphanage. Luo Nan's impression of this place gradually grew clearer. In his eyes, the deepest impression that the overall layout of the orphanage gave people was that it was simple yet extremely stylish. For example, the reception room. There were crisscrossing pipes overhead, but the entire floor was painted ash gray. There were wooden frames of the same color on the walls, and there were short tables of the same color on the floor. There were also 2 half-worn peach-colored sofas and a recliner that came from God knows where. The fruit platter on the short table was in the shape of an extremely interesting ladle. The light emitted from the iron cover hanging from the ceiling made people feel extremely comfortable. Chapter 437. Actually, in the 20 years since the construction of Gear, students and society members of different batches had come and gone like a horse lantern. Most of the time, Gear was not short on money. Interior renovation was a common thing. The interior decorations before Luo Nan took over were already beyond recognition from the very beginning. The interior renovation project of Gear was about to begin during this time. Luo Nan held many renovation blueprints in his hands, but he was unable to grasp them. He felt that the designer's tricks did not match with his mother's great works. But now he saw the layout of the reception room and he was inexplicably pleased. Of course, this was not to say that moving this room to Gear was pleasing to the eye. It was just that this was how it should feel at this time and place. The interior layout would not make people forget that this was an abandoned shopping mall located in the dangerous recycling stratum. But sitting here and casually touching it was a relaxing atmosphere that made people cherish it even more. Especially when he heard Nurse Wang say that most of the furniture and decorations here were personally arranged and built by Dean Wan and the children. Luo Nan felt even more admiration. Even if such a person was involved in a secret order, it would be hard for people to feel ill will towards him. But looking at it from another angle, it seemed that worker Zhai still had a rather difficult path to walk in order to make Di Weiwu truly believe in his godfather. Afraid of delaying the children's rest, Luo Nan and worker Zhai did not stay for long. They walked one round around the orphanage before saying their goodbyes and leaving. As before, they took the 24-hour low-altitude public bus and embarked on their return journey. Worker Zhai finally had some free time on the bus. He talked to Luo Nan about proper business, the dynamo core that he was researching. Right now, the dynamic structure mode has been basically determined. The simulation results are pretty good. But the bottleneck lies in the materials. I want to find you to confirm it. If possible, I suggest we use the method of dismantling and mending. Dismantling. East wall to repair west wall? Yes. If this dynamo core is only used for the Tai Chi ball, there is actually a large amount of redundancy in its functionality. We can use this point to cut off other unimportant branches to mend the gap. Luonan said, you'll have to ask Shuelei about this. Or you can just ask the gym master to make a decision. Sure. Tell me when you get back. I can do a few more simulations. Speaking of Xiao Xinyu, Luonan remembered the Battle of Winter Solstice. He immediately called Shuelei to ask about the situation. Shuelei picked up the call quickly, but he also hung up quickly. His progress was terrible. The only thing that could be confirmed was that Dojo Master Xiao had received Duan Hong's letter of challenge a long time ago. Luonan let out an "oh" and didn't say anything more. The journey was smooth. They arrived at Ocean Sky Cloud City in about 20 minutes. The atmosphere in the large living area was a bit worse than it was a dozen days ago. The collapse of Aurora Cloud City's parking lot had scared quite a few people. Right now, the construction team was still working on the repairs. The security team had already helped Luonan check in on the way here. Luonan and Qin Yikuan went straight upstairs after getting off the car. Qin Yikuan specifically chose a high-altitude bedroom on the 150th floor. Ocean Sky Cloud City's most famous viewing platform was a few floors down. That's right. Luonan chose Ocean Sky Cloud City not just because this place was only a few steps away from Acumen College. It would save him quite a bit of trouble when he went to school tomorrow morning. More importantly, there was a flying devil ray that he could use here. Luonan and Qin Yikuan just came out of the elevator when they saw the water within the central crystal pillar stir. The enormous body of the devil ray was like a bomber flying through the water. It swept past the crystal wall closest to the elevator and greeted Luonan. So this is an infrasonic wave generator. Qin Yikuan was a bit moved. With the flying devil ray as a tool, Luonan's combat strength could already be evaluated as AB+ rank. Moreover, the sky was his main battlefield. He could come and go as he pleased. So from Luonan's perspective, this place was probably the safest place in Xia City aside from President Ouyang's laboratory. Qin Yikuan obviously understood Luonan's intentions. He was very grateful for this. In a public place like a hotel, any security team would have a relatively thorough contingency plan. It saved him a lot of effort. I'll be next door. Mr. Luo, just call me if you need anything. There shouldn't be anything. I'll go take a stroll on the viewing platform in a bit. I'll go with you. Qin Yikuan didn't forget that this 16-year-old youth's battle had taken place there. Even if Luonan didn't believe that headquarters would send people over to make a move, he still had to prevent certain people from losing their minds and going crazy, right? Luonan didn't mind. He entered the room and gave a rough glance before coming out and heading to the viewing platform. There were people coming down from the upper floor when he entered the elevator. There were 7 or 8 of them and the elevator was half full. They seemed to be quite familiar with each other. They were all talking. They should be attending a gathering or something at the same time. The gathering was over right now. Chapter 438. Luonan's ears perked up when he heard a rather familiar word. The speaker's voice was actually quite soft. It wasn't very obvious in the exchange of greetings between the group of people, but it couldn't be hidden from ability users like Luonan and Qin Yikuan. Qin Yikuan had done his homework quite well. He noticed Luonan's expression, so he shot a glance in that direction and raised his spirits. As for Luonan, he didn't need to turn his head at all within this narrow space. He could distinguish everyone's faces purely by relying on his mental senses. Then he noticed a familiar face. What a coincidence. The person who spoke in front continued, with this skill, we must continue to work hard and make a name for ourselves as soon as possible. In this day and age, the most undesirable thing is to be pretentious. If we have the ability, we must show it to others. Let's not go back first. Let's go to the viewing platform to get some fresh air and have a deep chat. At this time, the elevator went down to the 142nd floor, where the viewing platform was. The elevator door opened and Luonan and Qin Yikuan glanced at each other. Qin Yikuan extended his hand to indicate for Luonan to go first. Luonan nodded and went out first, but he felt that Qin Yikuan's reaction was a bit off. He paid attention to the target, but that was all. His level of vigilance did not keep up. Luonan ignored what was behind him after walking out of the elevator. He walked straight in the direction of the viewing binoculars. His behavior was quite natural, but at the same time he privately contacted Qin Ikuan through the Hexaear ability user. What? Which one? The one who didn't speak. If it weren't for Qin Ikuan's well-trained training, he would have turned around and left. At this moment, 2 more people came out of the elevator and turned in the direction of the heavenly ocean lake. They were the 2 people who wanted to have a deep chat. Qin Ikuan listened carefully to the man's footsteps. At the same time he tried his best to sense, but he did not discover anything new. I can't sense anything at all. Yes, he hid it very well. If Luo Nan hadn't been able to see the scene of this person preaching from afar through his mental senses, he would have inadvertently missed this person. The most amazing thing was that the other party didn't seem to be deliberately concealing it. Instead, in the most natural state, it restrained all the abnormal aura and maintained the most harmonious state with the surrounding environment, just like his work. At this time the conversation on the other side was going on. The person who spoke earlier seemed to be very impatient. As soon as he stood still, he said in an especially excited tone, "I've already thought about it. I'll use concepts like the meditation club or the oxygen bar." Are you talking about me? I don't mean to offend you, but in my opinion, Mr. Luo, the way you affect the surrounding environment is very likely to be too direct and violent. At least according to my senses. This was the second time Wanta had said this, and it was more direct than the last time. Qin Ikuan, who was at the side, wanted to stay far away. If he continued to listen, his head would probably explode. However, when he heard Wanta's words, he did not dare to move. He was worried that if these 2 did not get along, they might end up fighting. Luo Nan only displayed a bit of curiosity. Rough? Do you think so, President Wan? I think so. We should have something in common on this matter. For example, we all use various methods to form our own order. But next, I use the law of creation to affect external objects. Starting from the plants and trees around me, I create the most suitable pattern according to their respective material natures. Look, this is my ritual for sensing material natures. Wanta directly formed a seal with his hands and adjusted his breathing. He gradually raised the seal from his lower abdomen to the space between his eyebrows. This ritual is something I modified by referring to the model of traditional religions. What I seek is the state of harmony between my body and the material form of the outside world. He really was preaching at the drop of a hat. However, Luo Nan greatly appreciated this frankness and directness. He also felt that the scene before his eyes was somewhat familiar. His mind spun twice and he finally thought of something. Wasn't this child? Back when he was at Frost River Reality on Fudong Great Street, the ears of truth had frankly and magnanimously exchanged knowledge with him. Speaking of which, they were all creatures that lived completely within their own logic. Wanta's description was quite precise, but Luo Nan knew that there was a more convenient method to communicate with such people. With this thought clear, Luo Nan cast his consciousness into the depths of the void. On the mental plane, he deliberately operated the gravitational effect of the closed system, causing the heavily chained crow to reveal itself and head straight for the abyssal region. Last time, he and Child had used the form of confrontation on the mental plane to complete the relevant communication. Now he made the same invitation to Wanta. Luo Nan felt that Wanta would use a similar method to respond. However, Wanta's method was a bit novel. He raised his hand to his forehead and pressed it down again, ending at his lower abdomen. But during this process, a layer of seemingly soothing undulation was conducted in a specific direction. Originally, it only flowed in the material world, but for some unknown reason, it suddenly crossed the boundary between material and mental. It climbed layer by layer, heading straight for Luo Nan's plane. From Qin Ikuan's point of view, the various scenes on the viewing platform during this period of time were simply like an absurd play directed by a crazy artist. Luo Nan and Wanta maintained their silence most of the time. They just looked at each other. Luo Nan could roughly guess that they were communicating through the mental plane. There were very few times when the 2 would even open their mouths. However, the syllables that came out of Dean Wan's mouth did not belong to any language that Qin Ikuan was familiar with. They were more like some sort of religious incantation. As he spat out the syllables, he continued to form seals and wander. His movements were strange and complex. Then Luo Nan did the same. It was just that when he spat out the syllables, he used his hand to draw some sort of diagram. It was a vague representation of formatting theory. If they weren't ability users, if they weren't mentally enhanced, Qin Ikuan would be certain that they were all lunatics. Even now it was more or less the same. This bizarre exchange continued for approximately 20 minutes. Qin Ikuan watched until his scalp went numb. There were several times when he wanted to report the relevant situation, but he forcefully suppressed it. This continued until one moment when Luonan's brows suddenly furrowed. His movements paused as if he was troubled by something. Wanta undid his hand seals and returned to their normal form of communication. It's getting late. I need to go back. The public security over there isn't too good at night. Luonan went, oh, but he didn't urge him to stay. He just said, many thanks for your guidance. I will definitely pay you a visit later. Wanta simply replied with a word of welcome and nodded towards Chinikuan. He turned around and walked towards the elevator. Luonan watched him leave. He waited for the elevator door to open and close before going down. Only then did he turn his gaze towards the sparse starry night sky. Though he had something on his mind, he still sighed in satisfaction. Let's go back. Okay. Amidst the suddenly amplified noise, a huge amount of clouds and ice crystals swept past like an uncontrollable tsunami, displaying the worst side of the cloud world. Luonan floated in the air, his soul cloak fluttering and swirling. He continued to interfere with the surrounding material world. This could be considered a brief warm-up. Luonan had already locked onto his target at this time. It was within the turbulent clouds 20 kilometers away. A mushed-mouth ape flew as fast as lightning, but it also showed rare signs of panic and pain. It let out an ear-piercing screech as it flew at high speed. Its body kept twisting as it tried to shake off the bindings on its body. As for the binding, it was the wraith sign. It's only been a few days and you've already created such a scene for me. Luonan was complaining, but he was actually quite excited in his heart. Ever since he discovered and entered the cloud world, he had always been tossing and turning, searching in the thick clouds, playing hide-and-seek with those mushed-mouth apes, but this world was really too big and too strange. He didn't find any traces left behind by his parents. He also didn't find Snake Tongue's shadow. There was no way for Luonan to be satisfied with this sort of progress. Things finally changed for the better when the wraith sign entered. Even though this was the result of the fellow not doing proper work. The mushed-mouth ape that lived in the cloud world was an extremely terrifying predator, and the wraith sign was one as well. The wraith sign was able to coexist peacefully with the mushed-mouth apes for the past 10 days under Luonan's constraints. But as Luonan's energy was constantly diverted by other matters, this fellow finally began to run wild. 4 days ago, the wraith sign used its powerful hunting instincts to silently lock onto this mushed-mouth ape. It used the polar domain to use an inconceivable method of infiltration to unwittingly lock onto the lifeline of this mushed-mouth ape. Then it exerted its strength today. The wraith sign's originally incorporeal body had already become indistinct and visible due to it being infinitely close to the material plane. Most of its body sunk into the back of the mushed-mouth ape. It greedily extracted the energy and blood of the mushed-mouth ape, transforming it into the nutrients it needed. Without a doubt, this marathon hunt had reached its end. The wraith sign bit into the throat of its prey and began to reap the harvest. But like all nature documentaries, this primitive and wild hunting operation had a very high probability of failure. Since the mushed-mouth ape's energy and blood was extremely vigorous, the transformation required a certain amount of time. The wraith sign seemed to be in control of everything right now, but it was actually at its weakest. It was infinitely close to the material plane, which meant that normal methods could strike it. The wraith sign was alive and well right now because it had effective control over the prey beneath it. But this control was unable to affect the other mushed-mouth apes. Right now, the prey beneath it shrieked in pain and the turbulence brought about by its high-speed flight. The other mushed-mouth apes had already received the relevant information. Even though they didn't have any kinship with each other, a few nearby mushed-mouth apes gathered over out of curiosity. The mushed-mouth apes' attack methods could cover the material plane and the mental plane at the same time. It could even blast all the way to the abyssal region on the mental plane. Once these mushed-mouth apes discovered the target and lent a helping hand, the wraith sign would become a living target. Luonan needed to do something. Even though what he could do was very limited. The scarcity of options made it easier for him to make a judgment. He pondered for a few seconds and his floating soul body suddenly sped up. The strength of his soul cloak slapping against the mist and ice crystals increased to the highest level. Rustling sounds rang out, and the interference force on the material plane was completely unleashed. At the same time, he expanded the range of his mental senses to the limit. One by one, he locked onto the mushed-mouth apes that surged over from all directions. It didn't matter what direction or distance they came from. As long as they were within the range of his senses, Luonan sent out a mental attack. The radius of Luonan's senses was roughly 25 kilometers. But when faced with a terrifying hunter like the mushed-mouth ape, the fragrance emitted by the soul body had to be at least 5 times the distance. The mushed-mouth ape was an existence that was essentially driven by instinct. They were practically unrestrained by social organizations. Between companions and food, what would they choose? Of course it would be food. Water vapor rose from it as it struggled and roared. It seemed as if it could charge out at any time, but it also seemed as if it could be cut in two by the ruptured door at any time. The water near Luonan's soul body actually had over 1,000 mental curtains that were intensely warped. They were linked to the material plane, and the external neuron was the core. The key structure was projected onto the normal scale, forming an incorporeal and unstable door. In this way, the space tunnel could temporarily exist independently from the space of the tree hole. However, after abandoning the fixed exit, the benefit of nearly zero consumption came to an end. The area where the mental and material planes converged had an enormous degree of warping, and the energy consumed was astonishing. As the sole energy provider of the external neuron, Luonan's accumulated soul strength had already fallen by 2/3 in a short second. This was an instantaneous drop that had never happened before. The rate of decline was very frightening, but if he could realize his expectations and deliver a B+ rank vicious beast to him, it would be worth it. However, reality was always more bony than ideals. This won't do. I won't be able to deliver it. Luonan sensed both sides at the same time. He knew that the cloud world and the normal world were connected by a crack that could transport objects. But the volume and weight of the object were not important. What was truly troublesome was the influence it had on the framework of the world order. To move the rotten-tail ape over, the gravitational force on the other side would become extremely astonishing. It was like 1,000 incorporeal ropes and chains binding it. Luonan had already squandered away the little bit of flexibility it had left. He could forcefully continue, but from this point on, every time a small part of its body was pulled out, the consumption would increase exponentially. Looking at the enormous body of the rotten-tail ape, which was over 6 meters tall, Luonan's most robust accumulation of soul strength was only able to satisfy 1/10 of the requirements. Right, this was the result of not including the consumption of opening the unfixed passage. In other words, even if Luonan could shrink the rotten-tail ape by 10 times and perfectly fit it into the space of the tree hole, it would still be impossible to come over. The only good news right now was that the external neuron's energy consumption optimization was done very well. As long as this degree was maintained, the consumption of maintaining the space tunnel across the world was barely acceptable. He could bring this half of the vicious beast's body to come and go as he pleased. What the hell? Luonan originally believed that it could appear as a super profound meaning, but now it looked like it was just a remnant move? Demon summoning remnant? Roar of the rotten mouth ape? Luonan looked straight at the sinister and ugly face. He lost the courage to even imagine the thought of relying on this thing to deal with powerful people like Tian Bang. Chapter 443. Darkness still covered the forest. Most of the living beings here were still in deep sleep. Only a few small nocturnal beasts by the lakeshore noticed the abnormal churning surface of the water in the center of the swamp lake. They let out low roars of unease, creating a bit of noise. But that was all. A dim red light flickered faintly beneath the surface of the lake. But after a few seconds, both light waves and water waves returned to tranquility. This is barely enough. Luonan shrugged his shoulders a bit awkwardly. His soul body, which could sufficiently interfere with the material world, felt no different from his fleshly body when he moved. and because of this he was able to fully feel the blazing aura spreading from behind him. 10 centimeters above the shoulder of his soul body, about the same height as his ears, was a pair of thick and ugly ape arms. They were slightly bent and extended, but the back end was empty. No body could be seen. It was as if the arms had appeared out of thin air. The two ape arms were over 2 meters in length. They exceeded the height of most people and their muscles were robust. Perhaps people would believe that they were two human silhouettes in the darkness. The flowing lava on the ape arms hardened slightly in the lake water, looking like warped scales. In comparison, the flames were restrained, fusing together with the messy fur patterns on the body. It was eye-catching, but it really went against the aesthetics of ordinary people. Come move. The ape arms made a few fist-clenching movements following Luonan's thoughts. Aside from the control of the fleshly body, it also included releasing energy, interfering, and so on. The bottom of the lake became muddy for a time. Mud flowed everywhere. The underwater life forms that inhabited here, such as carps, eels, shrimps, and even alligators, swam around in drilled holes. Occasionally, some would bump into the ape, but the latent energy would turn the world dark. They were battered and exhausted. Looking at the situation of releasing energy, the mushed-mouth ape's strength had crossed over to the other world. Roughly 20 to 30% of its strength had been consumed. However, the lava bombardment, which shook and warped the mental and material planes, was still effective. In this way, Luonan could borrow Luonan's mental sensing ability to replace his eyes and ears. This pair of enormous ape arms could display considerable combat power. Considering continuous combat, Luonan would be able to endure for 1 to 2 minutes, considering the enormous consumption from tearing open the spatial passageway. This was the most feasible plan that Luonan could find. It was the point of balance that Luonan had found between the cloud world and the normal world. As for how long he could endure if he truly unleashed his full strength, he still needed to continue experimenting. Unfortunately, it would not be possible this morning. The chase and treatment in the cloud world had seriously consumed Luonan's free time. He wanted to continue researching the problem of the mushed-mouth ape with all his might, but for the sake of preventing Chin Ikuan and the others, who were in charge of security work, from sensing that something was amiss, he could only restrain his mind and retract his giant ape arms. On the other side of the cloud world, the mushed-mouth ape, who had been reduced to a test subject, wasn't cut in two. It had only fallen into the fog formed by the cross-border passage and was so distorted that it could not be seen. Only when Luonan sent the ape arm back did this enormous vicious beast materialize from incorporeal, returning to the cloudy world. From now on you will be Yuan Yi. Luonan casually gave the mushed-mouth ape captive a name, and he temporarily set aside Cloud Peak. His soul body leaped out of the surface of the lake, and he rushed back to Ocean Sky Cloud City. He strove to cut into his normal routine. When the soul returned to the hotel, it was already 4 o'clock in the morning, and it was time for morning classes. Luonan was destined to not need to sleep. This kind of lifestyle wasn't very healthy, but he had to get used to it. Luonan hid in his bed and adjusted his breathing for a bit. Then he began his morning classes. He began with Dowing. His movements were slow and relaxed, but he constantly touched the limits of what his fleshly body could bear. A thin layer of sweat formed on his body after a quarter of an hour, and he gradually entered an optimal state. Luonan entered a very rare state of relaxation. His body was tough and relaxed and he went with the flow. It was as if he could easily complete any difficult movement. This method of combining Daoyin and yoga was the most suitable for restoring his physical strength and energy. The initial results were pretty good. Luonan seemed to be half asleep and half awake. He was already half in a meditative state. But he didn't know when it started, but his mind suddenly stirred restlessly. The scenes that happened in the cloud world, especially the scene of him being chased by the 5 mushed-mouth apes, continuously leaped back and forth in his mind. Only through this method did Luonan truly understand what sort of state it was to be surrounded by perils. He was already very nervous when he personally experienced it, but when he truly recalled it, he discovered that the dangers that could consign him to eternal damnation were far greater than what he had perceived back then. It was hard for Luonan's mind to calm down at this point. He also knew that this sort of situation was most likely due to the effects of fire poison on his soul body. His injuries had yet to heal. His current situation wasn't too good. It must be known that the mind was in a mess, and the mind was in a mess, and the mind was in a mess. The circulation of the blood energy in his entire body would be affected, forming a vicious cycle that would injure his foundation. The most important thing is still to compose my mind. Gym Master Shio once said that it's hard to be calm in the midst of stillness. I should seek to be in motion. I still have a place to start. Luo Nan's mind changed and he no longer forcefully restrained himself. A strand of thoughts of divinity naturally followed one of the most profound trajectories in recent times. It revolved and transformed. In the blink of an eye, a transparent bead of water condensed in front of his forehead out of thin air. Luo Nan's method of achieving stillness within motion was the dripping sword. The amount of effort Luo Nan put into the dripping sword over the past 10 days or so wasn't any less than what he put into the cloud world. After all, this was the most effective method for him to consume soul strength. Of course, just now, the demon summoning that forcefully dragged the mush-mouthed ape into the real world had successfully replaced the dripping sword's pouring milk mode in terms of consumption and speed of consumption. In the future, he probably wouldn't have to worry about the diseases of wealth, such as the imbalance of his body and soul. And on the other hand, the value of the dripping sword was far from being able to be encompassed by the term pouring milk. It was an extremely mature and perfect method. Whether it was to face an enemy or to cultivate, it could give rise to countless transformations. It was extremely malleable. Moreover, it involved the structural changes of the neurons in the outside world, their functions, and the interference effects of the soul body. It looked simple at first glance, but it was boundlessly profound when examined in detail. Luo Nan wouldn't slack off in his practice of the dripping sword no matter what. Luo Nan discovered as soon as he got his hands on the demon summoning, that the process of creating and controlling the dripping sword was like turning a large flame to a small flame when cooking. Some minute changes in the control of the flame were contained within. As the water droplets appeared one after another before his eyes, the condensation ring structure that had condensed out of thin air was like a mirror. It reflected the various minute flaws that flowed through his mind. The injuries caused by the combined attack of the mushed-mouth ape had some areas that weren't recovered properly. But after the condensation ring and a few auxiliary structures were molded and combined, several hidden injuries that had nearly been missed were discovered. They were slowly drained and recuperated. Luo Nan continued to improve. Luo Nan thought of the words that Gym Master Shio had once said, "One is civil, one is martial. Tension and relaxation have their own paths." That was probably it. Sometimes they also needed to depend on Luo Nan's mood. They swam up and down, accepting the test of life and death. Luo Nan could verify the firmness and stability of the dripping sword structure through this method. Only a dripping sword that passed this test was a qualified dripping sword. Luo Nan was already familiar with this. He could control the 100 or so fish, as he washed and dressed at the same time. He was thankful for the hotel's allocated laundry facilities. His clothes, which were soaked with sweat last night, were now as clean as new. Luo Nan opened the door and left after dressing himself neatly. The door to the room next to him opened at nearly the same time. Qin Yikuan also put on his training clothes and came out to say good morning. "Mr. Luo, let's go together." Together. How about the green oxygen running track of Acumen College? No problem. At this time, there happened to be two young women who got up early for their morning jog. When they saw this scene, they exclaimed in surprise. One of them wore smart contact lenses. She blinked and captured this scene. But Luo Nan and Qin Yikuan had already run far away without looking back when they tried to strike up a conversation. A legendary master. Is he from our school? What a pity one is too big and the other is too small. Whatever, I'll just post it on the school's website. The two girls chattered away, but Luo Nan and Qin Yikuan could hear them clearly. The latter praised softly, exhaling qi like an arrow, gathering and not scattering. "Mr. Luo, your internal cultivation technique is progressing at a godly speed." Well said, Headmaster Shio. This is also the result of interference force. Luo Nan was already used to the constant interference effect of his soul strength on the material world. This was not only the case when his soul was in an out-of-body state, but it was also the case when his body and soul were present. This could help him familiarize himself with the subtleties of the material plane and harmonize his body and mind. Otherwise, even if he held a dagger or a gun, he wouldn't be able to make Shui Lei breathe during the battle. This kind of training method was something Luo Nan realized himself. No one had taught him. However, Luo Nan found a bit of theoretical support after his exchange with Wan Ta last night. According to Wan Ta's law of creation, the order differed from person to person. People needed to have a keen perception of the internal and external environment. They needed a kind of long-term contemplation of the internal and external harmonization of the body and mind. From this point of view, Luonan's path was correct. He couldn't help but sigh. Sure enough, cultivation still needed to communicate with people. He could see the road ahead clearly. After running another 2 or 3 kilometers, Chinikuin was a bit baffled. "Mr. Luo, is your school this lively every day?" Luonan followed Chinikuin's line of sight. His gaze pierced through the evergreen plants to the side of the green oxygen track and cast towards the nearby plaza. He saw people surging over there, signs waving in the air. There were at least 300 to 400 people gathered there. And there was an endless stream of people pouring in. The two were both ability users with sharp eyes and ears. They could see from afar that the signs over there had words like truth, transparency, and so on. Maybe the school did something stupid again? Luonan wasn't interested in this sort of thing at all. He continued to run forward. But there was another stream of people a few hundred meters away. It was a group of roughly 20-year-old young men and women. They whistled excitedly and waved signs as they passed through the long hallway. Hey, it seems like the scene is getting bigger and bigger. Luonan was curious as well. He lowered his head to look at his wristband and entered the school's network. He hadn't even opened the page when several notifications popped up. Luonan let out an ah when he saw the relevant content. He reached out his hand and smacked his forehead. "Mr. Luo? Damn it. Prematurely aged. What? Today is Saturday. It's the weekend. I don't need to go to school. Yeah. Oh, this is a common occurrence." Chinikuin came to a realization. So Luonan had gotten the date mixed up. Their security team thought that Luonan had other plans. They didn't ask anything and just stayed with him in the hotel for the night. After all, he was a young man. Forget it. I'll just go with the flow. I'll go take a look at gear. The school cafeteria should be open today. Breakfast is on me. Brother Chin and the others, give me some face. Chinikuin laughed as he shook his head. I'll thank you on their behalf. However, it's better for everyone not to gather together in a public setting. Perhaps it will cause trouble for future assignments. I can help them get their meals. Okay. I'll choose a few special breakfast dishes. Luonan had completed today's training load. He led Chinikuin to the cafeteria. Chinikuin's gaze swept across the clusters of gathered students. Speaking of which, is there going to be a demonstration in the school right now? Yeah. But it's not just Acumen College. It's the entire city's colleges and universities. They're going to set a record for a city-wide student demonstration. Luonan opened his electronic calendar and confirmed the time. November 17th, the 150th birthday of World University. Those seniors might want to organize some commemorative events. As for the theme of the demonstration, according to the notifications, it was mainly to express dissatisfaction with the transparency of government governance. Earthquakes, terrorist attacks, and many other recent public events. People urgently needed to know the truth, to put an end to the days of rumors flying everywhere. Chinikuin laughed after hearing Luonan's introduction. He was a bit disapproving. From his perspective, it was better to feign ignorance of these cruel truths. For example, if a certain person was in a bad mood, he could use infrasonic waves to wipe out the entire city. Did these students really want to know? Could they accept it? Luonan felt Chinikuin's gaze. He wasn't too clear on the specifics of Chinikuin's thoughts, but he could feel some sort of emotion. So he shrugged his shoulders and pointed in a different direction. How about we speed up a run in the school's cafeteria number 1? After a short breakfast time, the security personnel's work methods changed. Chinikuin no longer followed Luonan closely. Instead, he went into the darkness with his companions. Luonan was constantly being watched by several pairs of eyes. He couldn't tell the difference between protection and surveillance. Chapter 445. Luonan stood at the edge of the swamp lake in front of gear. His nose twitched slightly. Aside from the fishy smell of water flowing through the air, there was also an indescribable smell. It was very faint, yet it lingered in the air without dispersing. The nose orifice was connected to the lungs. Luonan had already begun to practice the corresponding internal cultivation technique. His foundation was deep due to his year-round breathing exercises. His progress was extremely fast. Currently, his cultivation of the 5 zangs, 6 roots, and 9 apertures had reached the primary level. His liver, heart, spleen, lungs, eyes, tongue, mouth, and nose had all reached the primary level. Only the ear aperture and kidney chi still needed to be polished. Now he stood by the lake, his nostrils quivering and his mouth slightly open. His inner chi naturally nourished the corresponding organ structure of the human body, making the corresponding receptors more sensitive. The small chemical molecules floating in the air stimulated the relevant areas through the corresponding channels, activating the corresponding feelings and memories. His sense of smell and taste intertwined to form the basis of his judgment. It even formed a set of blurry images that reflected the relevant information. Perhaps Luonan suspected that this was a predetermined answer, but Luonan was still able to confirm that the source of this wave of relatively stimulating small molecules was the mushed-mouth ape tossing and turning at the bottom of the lake in the wee hours of the morning. It's hard to avoid getting caught in the mud. The deeper one cultivated, the more sensitive they would be to the changes in the external environment. The more detailed the information they collected, the closer their perception and judgment would be to the truth. Most of the time, it was beyond the comprehension of ordinary people. It was as if he had the eyes of a ghost that could see through the truth. Therefore Luonan returned to gear. He wanted to see if there were too many traces left behind from midnight's violent summoning. If there were, he would clean up the loose ends to prevent attracting flies. As it turned out, he was right to come. Luonan's soul strength was like an incorporeal cloud that pervaded the void. He used his interference power to disperse the aura traces around the swamp lake as much as possible. Then he entered the passageway at the bottom of the lake and wiped away some of the burnt mud. At that time the temperature at the bottom of the lake was indeed very high. Even if the mushed-mouth ape had crossed the boundary between the two worlds, its destructive power was still quite shocking. This was very good. However, it wouldn't be fun if they were discovered early on. Fortunately, Luonan had to clean up gear and its surroundings every few days, sweeping away all the monitoring devices. Otherwise it would be even more troublesome. Xie Junping had yet to arrive by the time Luonan walked out of the passageway at the bottom of the lake. Xie Junping sat in the corner of the bar outside the passageway, waiting. He didn't stay idle either. With a thought, the 10 raindrop swords circling the top of the troposphere flew over one after another. They passed through the door as if they had a mind of their own. By the time they reached Luonan, the water droplets were full, sparkling and translucent. Of course, these water droplets were formed later on. Under the harsh environmental test at the top of the troposphere, it was difficult for the external water droplets to exist for a long time. They could only be driven by the strong structural framework to ensure an endless stream of water droplets. Perhaps this was the true killing move of the water drop sword. Luonan pondered over the concrete scenario of facing the enemy. Unfortunately, he was unable to find an opportunity to experiment, so he stopped thinking about it. To him, there were other uses for these 10 water drop swords that he had spent so much effort to condense and test them. Come on, it's time for nutrition. The electric light between his eyebrows flickered, and the external neuron in the form of a dripping sword emerged from his skull. The electric fire that lingered around it suddenly forked and struck the other 10 dripping swords. The water droplets instantly evaporated, but the structural framework was still there. It even formed a subtle connection with the external neuron. The external neuron trembled, miraculously projecting its current structure onto the other 10 dripping swords. Similarly, the other 10 dripping swords also mapped their respective structural details onto the external neuron. Just as he had experienced before, the higher his cultivation, the more different his perception became. When one progressed to a certain degree, it would already exceed the scope of common sense. It would even subvert one's worldview. Luonan's cultivation progress was extremely fast. It was not excessive for Qin Yikuan to praise him with words like godly speed. At the same time, his perception of the world was endlessly deepening. His current perspective and viewpoint were somewhat different from what they were a week ago. The difference was even more obvious after 10 days to half a month. This kind of change was perfectly embodied on the dripping sword. It was embodied on the structural circuit constructed by the external neuron. Luonan's attainments in the dripping sword could be said to be at a high starting point and a high level. He had just entered the door, but he had already surpassed the efforts of the vast majority of people. The condensation ring mold he had constructed for the external neuron earlier was a divine item that he had miraculously obtained in his peak state. It broke through the boundary between the mental and material planes in one fell swoop. It was the core that allowed Luonan to fully display the circulation of his soul strength. But as time passed, Luonan's soul strength continued to rise. His 9 orifices and 6 roots technique continued to perfect, and the level of his perception grew increasingly deep and rich. Looking back at the divine item from back then, there were some places that didn't seem to be able to withstand scrutiny. It would have been fine if the dripping sword was a consumable technique that could be used and thrown away at will. But he used the external neuron as a molding material, preserving the structural circuit for a long period of time. In this way, even the slightest flaw would be reflected in his mind, stimulating and reminding him at all times. He couldn't bear it no matter what. Right now, the external neuron was connected to the energy of the other 10 dripping swords. Their configurations reflected each other, superimposing and resonating. Due to the difference in materials, the skeletal structure of the other dripping swords was gradually unable to withstand it. They disintegrated one after another. The external neuron was much better, but it also referred to the structural changes of the other dripping swords and carried out minute adjustments. It sought the most stable structure under the destruction of resonance, ensuring that it was sturdier and more stable. Luonan closed his eyes. He paid attention to this process purely through his senses, experiencing the most exquisite aspects within. Luonan had discovered this method by chance. It made full use of the external neuron's marvelous intelligence, allowing it to possess a sturdy structure while still being able to guarantee continuous plasticity, striving for perfection. It also guaranteed that Luonan's research on the dripping sword would always be active, seeking change, and absolutely not sticking to convention. Oh, Dean 1 had said similar words before. Luonan felt that this was the right path. He couldn't see the end for a while. Xie Junping finally arrived after the structures of the 10 dripping swords had completely disintegrated. He rushed back directly after the morning class. He was still wearing a set of archaic exercise clothes. It matched his excessively young face, making him look a bit comical. But if one only looked at his face, one would feel that he was glowing with health. He was brimming with energy. He was completely different from the bewildered nocturnal creature of the past. Why didn't you pick up my call just now? Luckily I guessed that you were here. I'm working hard. Xie Junping's greatest benefit after officially entering the cultivation sequence was that he could normally communicate with a few unconventional matters. Xie Junping's acceptance of this was quite high, and he was quite interested. Speaking of which, with our friendship, don't you think that we should exchange information? Let's wait until you've truly entered the door. Luonan was really worried that Xie Junping would become a chatterbox. He took the initiative to change the topic. What do you need from me? Xie Junping was a bit hesitant. I'm afraid that you won't like to hear it. Luonan raised his head to look. He more or less understood what was going on when he saw Xie Junping's expression. It's related to this place? Xie Junping sighed. He sat on an empty chair in front of the bar. The ownership of gear will be decided soon. We'll enter the final bidding phase tomorrow. An announcement might be made on Monday. Do you want to go take a look? There's no need to participate in things that I can't decide on. Ho, your tone is getting bigger and bigger. You really don't want to go? Luonan laughed as he shook his head. Xie Junping sighed once more. He moved his elbows back and rested them on the bar counter. He raised his head in an exhausted manner. There's been such a huge change in the middle, but both sides are actually able to hold on until the end. Right now, the Construction Society is still quite confident. On the other hand, the Divine Research Society's previous financial backer has withdrawn his investment and merged with the Construction Society. This has dealt quite a blow to them. The newly invested LRCF is lukewarm. There's no sign of an increase in the stakes. They haven't even given up yet. I've looked for Tang Yi quite a few times, but I haven't gotten any clear words. So, with his current friendship with Lady Du, it would be great if he was still the president. LCRF. Life Fund. The corner of Luonan's lips curled up. Greedy capitalistic old wolves. Those in power are vainly trying to grasp power at straws. Xie Junping gave him a blank look. At the very least, my old man throws money in from time to time. He has a bit of authority. Now it was Luonan's turn to dissuade him. The Construction Society is up to no good. The LRCF isn't a good thing either. Since it's not a good thing for us to have anyone take over, why bother with this? These words make one's heart go cold. So it turns out that we've worked for nothing? Xie Junping laughed and turned his head. Speaking of which, what are you planning on doing in the end? Me? Luonan raised his hand to point at his nose. Conserve energy and prepare for war. Don't joke around. I'm being serious. Luonan's posture didn't change. He laughed involuntarily. Am I not being serious? It's true that I can't choose who will take over. But I will certainly properly communicate with those who take over what they want to do. It doesn't matter which method I use. Luonan's gaze pierced through the bottom of the lake and cast into the distance. It was in the direction of the large living area. Ocean Sky Cloud City was directly facing this place. Xie Junping followed Luo Nan's gaze and looked forward. All he saw was the turbid and dark bottom of the lake. He blinked his eyes. He didn't understand what was going on. Though I don't understand what you're talking about, it doesn't feel too good. Things won't get complicated, right? I hope so. After all, I don't want to complicate matters. There are far too many vexing matters. Luo Nan sighed. His fingertips moved to the space between his eyebrows. The external neuron mapped the relevant software interface, revealing his notepad. There were a bunch of unfinished matters on it. Big ones. Small ones. Things that could be spoken of. Things that couldn't be spoken of. Things that could be resolved. Things that couldn't be resolved. There were so many things that needed to be broken through. Luo Nan wasn't in the mood to continue chatting when he saw these recorded matters. He stood up and waved his hand at Xie Junping. You go organize the parade. I'm leaving. Don't. The main character will only appear at the most crucial moment. The various teams might not even be able to make it to the city center in the morning with today's scene. The most important moment is in the afternoon. Of course, the best time is still at night. I still want to take a nap here. Chapter 446. This was not the first time Xie Junping had spoken of the miracles of gear. Luo Nan did not find it strange. After all, Xie Junping belonged to his formatting theory system. It was not a big deal for Luo Nan to agree with gear. Moreover, the formatting theory system was in a constantly expanding state. The range of influence and interference grew wider and wider, and the levels grew richer and richer. The corresponding feedback grew more and more abundant. Luo Nan, as the master, had eaten his fill. How could he not allow others to drink some soup? Under these circumstances, Xie Junping had unwittingly mutated his root receptacle. He possessed a foundation that exceeded that of ordinary people. Wan Ta's awakening ceremony was tantamount to capturing Xie Junping's root receptacle, leading him into the door and activating his potential. Surpassing Du Yong on this foundation was a normal phenomenon. As for how things would develop in the future and what they would develop into, Luo Nan needed to analyze the root and make a clear direction before he could make a judgment. Luo Nan drew a profile of Xie Junping in accordance with the artifact mechanism discrimination technique taught to him by the gym master. Xie Junping's life sketches correspondingly appeared in Luo Nan's system. Xie Junping's life sketches became clearer and more penetrating. However, Luo Nan also thought that Xie Junping was a member of the formatting theory system. As for Wan Ta's law of creation, it was also a system. Luo Nan needed to pay attention to whether or not there would be problems with two systems at the same time. He had a pensive look. I need to have a chat with Dean Wan later. Xie Junping did not know how many thoughts went through Luo Nan's mind in the time it took for him to turn his face. He mistakenly believed that Luo Nan was the same as him and wanted to ask for guidance from Wan Ta. He rushed to recommend Luo Nan. Let Dean Wan teach you how to coordinate. He teaches different techniques to everyone in the morning class every day. He pays attention to them at the same time and gives pointers at the same time. He is precise and appropriate. Not a single one is missing. His ability to multitask is truly amazing. This was the second time Luo Nan heard someone recommend Wan Ta's coordinate technique. The last time was from Di Weiwu. One could imagine how deep of an impression this skill left on people. He was not pretentious. He nodded and said, I will learn it if I have the chance. Xie Junping chuckled and reached out to grab Luo Nan's shoulder. This isn't a skill that can be grasped just by learning. Dean once said that from the beginning one needs to go through 6 stages: temperance, habit, ritual, precision, efficiency, and coordinate. Each stage requires a large amount of practice. It takes a long time to form habits and instincts. It takes at least 3 to 5 years. So you were talking nonsense just now? Of course not, I just think that ability users like you would be more likely to accept it than us. Also, before you learn it, don't you need my help? Xie Junping grinned cheekily. He put one arm around Happy's shoulder and used the other to pat his chest. Look here, Xie Junping from Heaven Crystal Creatures. Thank you, young Master Xie. No, Nanster, please call me Director Xie. Xie Junping's nose was about to touch the sky. Right now, I'm already the CMO of Sky Crystal Biology's research and development subsidiary. The company's current market value is 5 billion. From a standard perspective, I've officially entered the cultivation sequence of Sky Crystal Biology. CMO, Chief Marketing Officer? Yes. The Chief Marketing Officer of a drug R&D company is a pharmaceutical sales representative? Xie Junping pushed him away. Enough. Other than those people in the company, I'm the first one to tell you. Is this how a brother should express himself? You've got to be shocked a bit. Luonan clicked his tongue twice. Okay. You can hold it in until now. You can hold it in. I have to thank Dean Wan. Actually, I was about to explode when I heard the news last night. But today I did my morning classes and read the scriptures. It seems like I'm fine again. Luonan quietly watched him act pretentiously until this fellow couldn't help but grin. Hurry up if you want to congratulate me. A company with a market value of 5 billion couldn't be considered top-notch in the eyes of a rich second generation like Xie Junping. But the information behind it was indeed worth celebrating. I remember you saying that your family's old man would rather hire a professional manager and set up a charity fund to raise money than let you take over. How many years? Cough. How many days ago was that? That's why there's an old saying. A scholar who has been away for 3 days must be looked at in a new light. Look, the living example is right here. So you blinded your family's old man's eyes? Xie Junping choked and couldn't speak. He extended his hand and pointed, but soon he laughed. That's right. The old man was testing to see if his eyes were blind or not. Luonan understood. It was clear that Xie Junping's recent performance of being reborn had reignited the flames of hope in his old man. Xie Junping took out a company with a market value of 5 billion for his own son to practice with. There was no need to say anything. This was his own father. Luonan sincerely wished. The old man isn't young anymore. I hope that his eyes will always be clear for the rest of his life. I thank your entire family. Xie Junping was already disinclined to get angry. Actually, he really did want to thank Luonan. Ever since he became a partner with Luonan, it seemed that some marvelous things would always happen. The people he saw, the things he experienced, made him ponder over a few questions he had never thought about before. Unknowingly, he had already changed his usual trajectory. Thinking about it, if it wasn't for the mysterious feeling he had when he was at Gear, Luonan wouldn't have been able to abandon his rich nightlife, doing things like meditation, chanting, researching magical arrays, and so on, no matter how unfathomable Dean Wan's soul awakening technique was. If it wasn't for this change, his old man wouldn't have given him this sort of nurturing test for him to inherit the family business. Perhaps he would have been like those drunken seniors of his. He would have relied on the so-called foundation to muddle through his days, until he tossed his last breath around in drugs, fine wine and women. Perhaps Xie Junping felt that this was pretty good in the past, but now he was faced with Luonan, Shuelei, and all sorts of other miraculous characters and events. His past days seemed too low. It should be better to take a few more steps forward while his own passion had yet to fade. Xie Junping suddenly laughed in spite of himself. He embraced Luonan's shoulder once more. Do you know what the biggest change is after I became CMO? Please advise me, Chief Xie. In the past, I spent my old man's money. There were many times when I couldn't find a reason to spend it, and the amount was very awkward. But now, I'm spending the company's money. All I need to do is say, I can earn it back, and it's fine. This is the privilege of a pharmaceutical representative. Your family's old man will cry, right? I feel like I'm holding on to a project that's guaranteed to be profitable. Of course, convincing a bunch of stubborn old fools will take a bit of time. Are you sure? I'm sure, and I'm sure. After all, the only person I really want to convince is my old man. I understand him all too well. Ever since I was young, he always told me this. People always need a little motivation. After all, our vision is only so far. Xie Junping straightened his arm and raised his thumb, squinting his eyes as he took aim. Start with small things that are easy to solve. Get rid of them first and get a sense of accomplishment. It's the same as stepping on the gas pedal. Then you'll enter the fast lane. Under the effect of inertia, you'll keep doing it until the next motivation arrives. So I don't need to promote a lot of new drugs. I don't need to double the company's profits either. I just need to perform a bit better than my previous terrible performance, and the second motivation will beckon me. Oh, I think I used this method when I was learning from Dean Wan. Hey, are you listening? Luonan was dazed for a bit. He nodded and said, make your family's old man happy, and I'll give you a $5 billion company as motivation. Is that right? More or less. Then I wish you an early improvement. Luonan looked at his watch, waved his hand and walked out. Hey, let's talk about the $5 thing. Xie Junping finally had a channel to vent his excitement. He grabbed onto Luonan, not wanting to let go. It's not like you're going to have a parade. Where are you going on the weekend? I got pointers from your family's old man. I'll go out and put it into practice. Ha! I'll find the easiest problem to deal with. I'll get some motivation or something. Chatting really did help open up one's mind. Luo Nan unwittingly sorted out a bit of a thread from a pile of vexed matters. Right now he was faced with a pile of vexed matters that could be roughly divided into 3 types. The first type was the type that had the heart but lacked the strength. For example, he had to clear his grandfather's name and make formatting theory a prominent school of thought. He would practically have to make the entire world his enemy. It was absolutely impossible to accomplish in a short amount of time. This included Quantum Corporation, the Ability User Headquarters, the Order of Justice, and other new and old grudges. These were the main bodies that gave him enormous pressure. The second type was the type that worked for a long time. For example, cultivating, studying, supplementing his general knowledge, and so on. It was hard to see results in a short period of time, but he had to spend time on them every day. He could not slack off in the slightest. The third type was the type that could be resolved. Most of them were temporary missions as well as small troubles that he encountered on a daily basis. These 3 types of matters were tightly interwoven together. They gave him pressure, took up his time, and distracted his mind. In the end, they destroyed his state of mind, causing him to be constantly affected by negative emotions. He was constantly fretful and restless. Right now Luo Nan was already clear that he was unable to completely eliminate the pressure. It was also impossible for him to lower the quality of his cultivation. This problem would inevitably exist for a long time. But looking at it from another angle, what he could do under these circumstances was actually simpler. Cut the tangled hemp with a sharp blade. He could use the fastest speed to resolve all the miscellaneous matters. He could sever the messy branches that were distracting his mind and let his energy return to the main path. He could also receive incentives in passing. Luo Nan pulled out a thread with great difficulty. He wouldn't waste any more time. He bid farewell to Xie Junping and walked out of gear. He took a look at the credit balance in his personal account. In terms of wealth, a 7-digit number was quite pleasing to the mind and body. He needed to make some extra money faster. Trigate Securities' business wasn't too difficult, and it had the highest quality-price ratio. Once it was completed, there would be a large amount of income. Perhaps he could even give the Devil Ray a down payment. It could be said that this was related to combat strength. It was necessary to speed up the progress. Working overtime on the weekends. That's it. Luo Nan used the Hexaear to open a high-precision city map and loaded the team search data onto it. He could see that the search range had expanded to the core city area in half a month. There were results, but there were also negative results. According to the latest intelligence, there was a high probability that the degree of invasion of the mutants had risen from the first stage of external infiltration to the second stage of primary infection. On a level that they were unaware of, there was even the possibility of a third stage of a new type of mutant. Luo Nan was quite baffled. Things had already reached this point. The Xia city government was still sealing off the news. It was quite shameless. Chapter 447. Luo Nan never expected that things would actually develop to this step when he first accepted the mission of preserving the genes and ecology of the native species. Though Luo Nan hadn't put much thought into this matter over the past half-month, he had still borrowed his knowledge to participate in a few meetings. He knew very well that he couldn't complete the mission alone. Therefore, for the first time in more than 10 days, he took the initiative to contact his nominal partner, Peony of the Hidden Indigo firm. Luo Nan walked through Ink's channel. This crow believer had been following by Peony's side recently. Using Ink as a medium was undoubtedly the most convenient. But when Luo Nan's telepathic thoughts shifted to absorb Ink's perceptual information, what appeared before his eyes was a world of darkness. Luo Nan spent a few seconds to get a general understanding of his surroundings. This was an alley between tall buildings. The fire escape ladder attached to the building and the automatic conveyor belt connected the building made the already narrow area even more unbearably crowded. This kind of dark and cramped area usually belonged to the recycling layer. In the shadow of the alley, a certain someone was leaning against the wall on the inside of the corner of the fire escape. The narrow corner could not accommodate her long legs, so she had one leg propped up and the other extended out of the staircase, half of her leg dangling in the air. In this way, Luo Nan could naturally see that the person was actually wearing a pair of cotton slippers. They looked fat and clumsy. It was a stark contrast to his handsome leather jacket and skinny jeans. Oh, the snake-patterned pointy high heels that were thrown askew to the side. Although the color was flirtatious and full of nightclub style, she should be able to hold it up. This sister was now shaking the bottle of wine with a mysterious smile on her lips. She looked like she had a hangover. Needless to say, she definitely looked good. But the problem was this nightclub girl who seemed to have just had a crazy night of fun and couldn't find her home. Was she really that free and easy yet strong and shrewd peony? If it weren't for the obvious difference in height and facial features, Luo Nan would have believed that he was looking at Cat Eyes, who was drowning her sorrows in alcohol. Under Luo Nan's command, Ink's claws hooked onto the railing of the staircase on the other side of the building. It observed from above. Perhaps she was looking too directly, but Peony suddenly raised her head and met the crow's pitch-black eyes. She raised the wine bottle and gestured. Have a good weekend. Against Ink or against Pat Block? It was most likely the latter. And so Luo Nan knew that it was very likely that he had underestimated Peony's level of keenness. Or perhaps Peony had been feigning ignorance all along, only revealing clues when she was hungover. Luo Nan certainly had to put 120% effort into dealing with this kind of woman with deep and sharp schemes. He didn't want to leave any clues for her to use against him, so he communicated with Peony through the rubber band on Ink's ankle. Moreover, he asked a question he already knew the answer to. Good morning. Did you just search this area? I didn't. The door was blocked, so I snuck out. Hee, why do you look like you've been caught red-handed? Luo Nan did his best to make his tone sound like that of an adult. He learned from Cragburst and joked a bit too much. Peony responded calmly, probably. But are you finally free this weekend and ready to officially join the crew and take a makeup break? Hey, don't ignore my contribution. Forget it. Luo Nan knew that Peony was looking down on his behavior of not putting in any effort during this time. Frankly speaking, he really hadn't put in any effort ever since he reported the whereabouts of the Winghand bloodbath. He had received over $1 million in remuneration so far. At least half of it was a bit of a hot potato. Peony didn't bicker with him about this. She just shook the bottle again. I can't keep you company today. I have something to do. Do you know? The World University's birthday is a holiday that belongs to us. Luo Nan was actually speechless. That's right. When he first met Peony, she came out of Acumen College. It seemed that she was a graduate student of some professor. She could be counted among the ranks of university students. Speaking up to this point, Luo Nan actually wanted to investigate Peony's background more than once. The problem was that he had to take Her Majesty Empress Wu's face into consideration. He could only act muddle-headed for now. You want to participate in the parade too? Speaking of which, Crow, you pay a lot of attention to the lives of students. I'm just surprised that you're not doing proper work. Mr. Crow. Alright, you can't add a suffix, right? Then, Mr. Partner, humans haven't evolved to the point where they work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week without sleep or rest. Humans are very weak. They get tired. We find time to rest. We find fun for ourselves. It is because of this that it is interesting and wonderful. So, don't obliterate the final value of human society. Luo Nan was speechless once more. He looked at her appearance. Could it be that you've fallen out of love, right? Don't read too much into it, Mr. Partner. I'm enjoying my current state. Unfortunately, I can only get drunk for a while. Peony faced Crow from afar. She shook the wine bottle once more and then she drained it in one gulp. The wine bottle smashed against the wall with a crash and then it fell down the stairs. In the end, it was smashed into smithereens. Peony stood up against the wall. She lowered her head and curled her lips in disgust. So ugly. She was referring to the cotton slippers on her feet. They were blue-checkered men's slippers. They were old and Luo Nan had a few pairs at home. The old and mediocre outer appearance really didn't match well with Peony's slender and well-proportioned feet. Speaking of which, could it be that this person became a mistress and was blocked at the door by the main wife? Did she run away in a panic? Elite women played this game these days. Well, it seemed to be common in television dramas. In reality, this was probably true love. It was a pity for those spare tires and men who admired goddesses. Luo Nan didn't make any moral judgments. In any case, he wasn't the one taking over. However, his feelings toward Peony had changed a bit. The element of looking up to and admiring her had lessened a bit, and he felt a bit more realistic. They were all ordinary people. Right now, he was a bit worried about Peony's state. It wasn't safe for a great beauty to stay on the recycling stratum when she was hungover, even in broad daylight. As for Peony's personal strength, he still had no idea. Hey, where are you going? Peony didn't answer. She turned her head and looked around. Finally, she saw her high heels lying crookedly to the side. She chuckled and casually kicked off the cotton slippers on her feet. She fitted her feet with the most suitable decorations. The bewitching patterns and shapes instantly drew out lines that were pleasing to the eye. Peony seemed to instantly regain her usual aura after putting on the shoes that belonged to her. She laughed again and waved her hand at Crow above her. Then she staggered her steps and walked out of the alley. She's definitely right. She's pretending to be calm. Luo Nan pondered over Peony's state of mind as he urged Crow to follow her. The alley went all the way up, slowly going from the recycling stratum to a normal street block. Perhaps the statistics of the public security department were far too accurate, or perhaps Peony had the talent to act in melodramatic dramas. It wasn't unexpected that such a great beauty would bewitch the eyes of some people. In the shadows of the building, a tall and coarse young man brushed shoulders with Peony. When he looked at her from the front, his eyes nearly popped out. He turned his head to look at her back and was stunned for a few seconds. In the end, his heart was clouded by lust. He turned around and chased after her, chuckling as he struck up a conversation. "Beautiful, where are you going?" Peony didn't pay any attention to him, but the young man's skin was thick enough. He followed closely and didn't let go. "Look at you. You didn't drink to your heart's content last night, right? I know a good place. Let's continue another round." Peony continued to move forward, but an inexplicable smile seeped out from the corner of her lips. The young man saw the side of the beauty's face suddenly come alive because of her smile, and he became more and more enchanted. He raised his hand, wanting to hook it around Peony's shoulder. Then he heard a slightly hoarse voice at this time. "I know that all life here has never cultivated properly." The young man's nose was already smelling the fragrance of a fragrant body mixed with the smell of alcohol. From his perspective, this was the smell of desire. Then the stairs came head-on towards him. Thump. The young man simply slammed into the stairs. He didn't move an inch, fainting. Peony didn't even turn her head. She continued to stagger forward, occasionally leaning on the wall. She chanted unhurriedly as she walked. Persevering in the 5 desires, infatuated with love, giving birth to anger. Using all desires and karma, falling into the 3 evil paths. Within the 6 pleasures of reincarnation, suffering all bitter poisons. The minute form of conception, constantly growing from generation to generation. What the hell? Luo Nan didn't understand half of what he heard. He just felt that it was like some sort of Buddhist scripture, and the color of the words and sentences made him feel uncomfortable. Peony's footsteps came to a halt just as he was baffled. She wasn't far from the mouth of the alley. The morning sunlight cut through the gaps between the tall buildings, miraculously falling at the end of the long alley ahead. Over there was a relatively bustling street. The stream of people passed through, and the clamor entered the ears. Ink folded its wings and stopped on a certain windowsill above the mouth of the alley. It continued to stare at her. But Luo Nan saw Peony smile inexplicably. She directly stepped out of the mouth of the alley, reflecting the slanting sunlight. Her smile was brilliant and bright, devoid of any depression or filth. Just like this, she naturally blended into the surging stream of people on the side of the street. However, the most eye-catching thing right now was a group of university students marching toward the City Hall Plaza. Luo Nan wasn't interested in this. He felt that the current Peony seemed to be easier to communicate with, so he asked, "You're planning on spending the day in the City Hall Plaza? Then do you have any information?" Clap, clap, clap. Clear and resounding applause rang out. Peony stood by the side of the road, forcefully applauding the marching group. She shouted loudly, "Unity!" Her drunken and wanton appearance was very annoying, but as a beauty she had special privileges. Most of the people in the marching group were stupefied, but there were still quite a few young men who laughed loudly in agreement when they saw the encouragement of a great beauty like Peony. Unity. Peony continued to applaud with all her might. She leaned forward slightly, arched her back and clapped her hands red. It was as if she was already immersed in the enthusiastic atmosphere. Then she shouted loudly once more, "Honor!" She was a beauty again and she was so sincere. This time there were even more people who responded. The sound waves had already converged into form. Honor. Faint beads of sweat appeared on Peony's forehead. She simply tore off her leather jacket and draped it over her arm. Her upper body was just a thin shirt, and it was completely unable to conceal her beautiful lines. However, what truly stirred people's hearts was her wanton and bright smile. Her snow-white teeth were revealed beneath her beautiful lips. They were so splendid. She walked into the marching group with large strides amidst this sort of smile. She was like the most familiar of friends. She opened her arms as if it was a matter of course, and she placed them on the shoulders of two students. The students just so happened to be a man and a woman. Both of them were stupefied. But at this moment, the screams and applause of the others shook the windows of the surrounding tall buildings to the point of droning. Peony faced the sky and howled amidst this wave of sound. Youth. The hearts of the marching group and the surrounding spectators had already been stirred by this dazzling beauty. Most of the people were already at a loss for words. They just screamed in response. Then everyone saw the arm that pointed to the sky. Victory. Chapter 448. This crazy woman. Luonan never imagined that a beautiful woman with the style of an elite like Peony would play so wildly after getting drunk. The most important thing was that she had super powerful rallying power. Even the citizens on both sides of the street were stirred up by the scene before their eyes. Quite a few people applauded, whistled, or gave thumbs up to the parade. The atmosphere and emotions of each side interweaved and collided, pushing the entire street to a state of climax. Luonan didn't know what to do in this situation. Muddle-headedly following in the air for half a block, Peony's interest actually increased rather than decreased. She was truly in high spirits from playing. In the end, Luonan felt that he really couldn't keep up with her anymore. He called out in secret, "Hey, are you planning on marching all the way to the municipal plaza?" Upon hearing this, Peony raised her head. Disregarding her current situation of being the center of attention, she extended her hand and pointed straight at the ink in the air. Amidst another wave of cheers, she laughed loudly. "Bet your college life on it. Do it." Damn, this woman is really crazy. Though he said this, Luonan was actually quite envious. First, it was Peony's innate talent as a natural leader. Her affinity, rallying power, and inciting power were all off the charts. With just a few vague words, she was able to make thousands of students and citizens dance with her baton. Secondly, it was probably that wanton and unrestrained attitude. This woman clearly hid deep, gloomy emotions in her heart, but the moment she walked into the crowd, it was as if all the obstacles had been swept away. Looking at her smile, it was as if there was bright sunshine shining directly in. Should he call her scheming or strong-willed? In any case, this was completely different from using alcohol to vent one's emotions. Cat eyes should seriously learn. Though Luonan was the least qualified to say these words. Luonan's main body had just walked out of Acumen College while he was paying attention to his partners going on strike. But where should he go next? He stood at the school gate, hesitating. Peony was the one in charge of communicating with Trigate Security. Without this link, Luonan would be unable to receive support from that side. Was he really going to wander around the city alone and cast his net a few times? Luonan's wristband suddenly vibrated. There was a call coming in and there was even a video request. Luonan swept a glance and rushed to connect. "Aunt?" On the virtual screen, Luo Shuqing's face was serious but pale. She did not look well. "Where did you sleep last night? Not in Blue Bay?" No, I'm at Ocean Sky Cloud City." Luonan answered cautiously. "What for?" "It's mainly because it's more convenient for me to go to school today, so I stayed with a few friends nearby. I forgot that it's Saturday. I'm at the school gate now." Luonan felt that there was nothing to hide. He even raised his hand to shine a circle in all directions to show his sincerity. He let his aunt see the surrounding environment. Even with his attitude, Luo Shuqing's expression was still serious. She seemed to be asking and confirming, "Was it Moya who was in Blue Bay last night? She seems to be there quite often recently." Luonan absolutely wouldn't take the initiative to admit that he had contacted Moya last night, so he spoke vaguely. But even so, his aunt did not let him off easily. Her tone was unusually stern. "You clearly know that Moya has been staying out with those scoundrels and hasn't returned, yet you still make things convenient for her. Do you think she's not having enough fun?" "How could I?" Luonan cried out, feeling wronged. "My sister wants the access rights. I can't just not give it to her. Recently, I had been living in the Nade district, so how could I have the time to care about Blue Bay? I haven't cleaned it for a long time." "That depends on the situation. That's your house. It's passed down from your ancestors. My heart hurts when I think about how it's been messed with by those fellows who don't know what's good for them. Take back your access rights." What was going on? It must be said that his aunt had been extremely dissatisfied with Moya staying out at night recently, but she didn't have any intentions of squeezing her daughter's living space outside. She couldn't bear it today? Luonan scratched his head a bit when he saw his aunt's unsightly expression. But he knew that he absolutely couldn't go against the Grand Secretary's will right now. He hurriedly said, "Don't be angry. Taking it back is just a matter of operation. I'll do it right away." "Wait for me to leave." "Huh? You're in Blue Bay right now?" Luonan finally discovered that the background of the video was a bit familiar. He wiped his cold sweat. He never thought that his aunt would actually get up early in the morning and kill her way to Blue Bay community to block the door. Clearly, his aunt had lost all patience with Emoya's lifestyle. Even if she carried the title of a feudal parent, she still wanted to forcefully intervene. "Seriously, is my sister still alive?" She ran off with her guitar. "There's no one over there. Then I'll send you the passkey. You can deal with it as you see fit." "No need. Why would I need the passkey for a house under your name? Aunt and I can't differentiate between inside and outside." Luo Shuqing clearly knew that Luonan was deliberately trying to be obedient, but this scene was far too rare. Even though Luo Shuqing was in a terrible mood, she still couldn't help slowing down her tone. "There's no need to curry favor and act cute here. I don't buy it. Emoya's way of doing things is very excessive. You, her accomplice, won't be able to escape. Of course there's also Emopeng. I remember every single good deed you three have done. Let's go back and talk about them one by one. Please calm your anger. There's nothing to say. As long as you can make my sister fully realize her mistakes, I'll be willing to accept a few beatings." Luonan could sell out his sister in minutes without any pressure. And this sort of jesting and joking method was much better than being a yes-man. Luo Shuqing finally hooked her lips. "You've become quite glib lately. Do you have a girlfriend?" Luonan blurted out, "How is that possible?" He had learned quite a few dirty jokes from Papercut and Cragburst. Cat Eyes was also someone who dared to say anything. Mixing around with that lawless ability user would cause some changes in his speech habits. And this seemed to be the most effective way, right? Luo Shuqing really did divert his attention. "I heard Mo Ping say that you have quite a good luck with women at Acumen College. He's just jealous that I'm being taken care of by my senior." "Okay, I know. No matter how charming the children of the Luo family are, there's no problem with their hearts. However, you need to learn some skills in getting along with people. Don't be so straightforward. You'll hurt yourself and others. That's not good." "Yes, you're right. It's not a problem for you to have a few more friends. But don't learn from your sister. Don't fall head first into those circles." I won't. Luonan laughed dryly. He said a few more words and finally hung up the phone. He didn't stop after that. He immediately found Emoya's number and dialed it. However, there was no response from the other side. Did I just lose contact? What kind of trouble did I get myself into? Luonan called twice, but he didn't get a response. He couldn't help but scratch his head. His aunt's emotions were controlled quite well when she was talking to him. But if she wasn't truly furious, she wouldn't have vented her anger on him. Luonan was a bit regretful right now. He should have made a trip to Blue Bay last night when he passed through the Riverwu district to understand the situation. He paced a few steps in front of the school gate, his hand pressed to his ear. He considered finding a skilled expert like Bamboo Pole to lock onto Emoya's position. Was this making a mountain out of a molehill? His wristband vibrated just as he hesitated. He subconsciously connected the call and Emoya's voice came through. Chapter 449. You're looking for me? Luonan let out a sigh of relief when he heard Emoya's voice. Then his anger flared up. You're the one who's looking for me, to take the blame. What are you talking about? Emoya's background was noisy. The sound of a piano and drums joined together. It seemed like someone was calling her. She responded with two sounds before turning around to talk to Luonan. I'm rehearsing right now. I'll contact you in a bit. Luonan looked up at the sky and sighed. Emoya, you sure have a big heart. The high priest has exploded and you still have the heart to rehearse. Are you going to hold a concert for 10,000 people? 100,000 people level. Screw your 100,000. You're dreaming. Yeah, I'm dreaming. I'm hanging up. Emoya, why don't you try calling my name again? So what? Emoya, you tricked me. Tisk, little brother, you're such a good boy. Come over to the municipal plaza at noon. I'll treat you to a meal and introduce you to some beauties. Luonan was a bit stupefied by Emoya's unpredictable attitude. But he soon recalled that this was Emoya's usual trick. He laughed and was about to retort when Emoya said, Oh right. Don't come too early. Our practice venue is rented until 2 o'clock. We'll be racing against time. There's really a show? What do you think? I'll contact you at noon. I'm hanging up. Then the call was cut off. Luo Nan stood at the school gate and sighed after a while. Today's plan was doomed to fail. He spoke to Qin Ikuan and rode a security vehicle to the municipal plaza. It was a bit early to go over, but his previous plan had been destroyed. He didn't know what to do for a time. Luo Nan's consciousness shifted to Ink's location in the car and locked onto Peony. If Peony were to follow the procession, they would most likely reach the municipal plaza. For safety's sake, he needed to maintain a distance from her. But what in the world was this sister doing? She was stirring up a storm in the procession just a moment ago, but she immediately left the procession after receiving a phone call. Luo Nan ran to a relatively sparse location with a few flashes of light. Ink followed him out of habit. Peony displayed her extraordinary keenness once more. You're here again? How did she know that I just left for a while? Luo Nan was a bit stupefied. He replied, What are you going back and forth for? Peony stood in the shadow of a tall building, far away from the clamor of the crowd. She smiled as she looked at the surging stream of people. Fulfilling everyone's wishes. For them, this level of achievement was enough. In any case, most of them didn't want to do anything. Even if some of them were like this, they didn't have enough awareness to pay the price. It's not even as good as your attitude towards work. Even? That wasn't a good word at all. Peony put on her leather jacket again and laughed happily. Including me, I'm not as good as you, alright? That's why it's good to participate. It's more valuable to work with you. Thank you for thinking highly of me, but now it's my turn. When you said you have something to do, are you referring to watching the parade with me? Go to the municipal square on the way. Municipal square? Where are you going? You're right. That place will be a good place soon. The city government will cry if they hear this. As long as it's meaningful to us. This is indeed a good opportunity. Luo Nan was suddenly unable to keep up with Peony's train of thought. Opportunity? What opportunity? Peony pulled her hair back into a ponytail. She bit a rubber band in her mouth and cast a sidelong glance at Ink. It looks like I overestimated you, Mr. Partner. Luo Nan didn't care about Peony's evaluation. He knew early on that this Miss Peony could toss him in the dust in terms of planning and scheming. She was just stating the facts. His attitude was upright and very calm. You don't need to evaluate my thinking ability. You just need to provide the conditions for me to reveal my search and sensing ability. I believe that this is the meaning of us being partners. Oh, that makes sense. Peony really did seriously consider this for a moment. Then she nodded. That's what the firm told me in the beginning. How could I forget? I'm sorry. Maybe I drank too much last night. Of course, it's more likely that you haven't fulfilled your duties during this time, giving me some sort of misconception. Maybe. Peony tidied up her ponytail and stepped on the high heels on her feet. I need to change this too. But let me first explain the so-called opportunity. Since we're going to the municipal square, as long as it's not a particularly exhausting matter, we can completely handle the related search work. After all, this is an opportunity to collect sufficient samples. Samples? That's right. 3 samples. It's just like what's described in the records of the operation. After this period of incubation, the probability of a third-stage mutant infection appearing has already reached a statistically significant significance. Speak in human terms. In other words, due to the invasion of this batch of mutants, the ecosphere of Xia City has already received serious contamination. Affected by this, it's very likely that a primitive mutant has already appeared by our side. Its original form might be a rat, a wild dog, a crow, or even a person. But in the end, it will become a monster with an intense desire for destruction and an instinct for reproduction. And then? The municipal government is still sealing off the information. Then a biohazard crisis type of blockbuster will play out in Xia City. When that time comes, we definitely won't be able to get the follow-up payment. The firm's reputation will pretty much be wiped clean. I'll lose my job and my partner will probably have to change employers. Of course, this is the worst-case scenario. This demonstration is truly righteous. It's also our opportunity. Peony pointed at the gradually departing procession. Look, a procession like this can be seen on over half the streets of the city. There are a total of 954,000 or so registered university students in the Xia City region. They come from over 70 institutions of higher learning. 4 major districts are spread throughout the north, south, east, and west of the city. The number of people participating in the demonstration is over 100,000. And if we include those fellows who join in the fun, the police and civil servants who are responsible for maintaining order, the merchants who seize business opportunities and service personnel, etc., the number of people involved will certainly exceed 200,000. Oh right, there's still a performance tonight. Singers, famous actors, popular boy and girl groups, virtual idols, and so on. By the peak hour of the evening, the number of people gathered within a 5-kilometer radius of the municipal plaza will be between 300 and 500,000 people. Do you believe it or not? Luonan didn't respond. He couldn't help but think about what a canned sardine crowd of 500,000 people would look like. At that time, the residents of every corner of Xia City will appear in the plaza. A sampling rate calculated from the total population of 90 million people in the main city district of Xia City is quite reasonable, whether it's from a sociological or biological perspective. Luonan had a general idea, but he still needed to confirm it. What do you mean? You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.